news with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christys. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said Storm.
you made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christys tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting.
I knew her, and unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frothy in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 12th of June. Today, Tory wipeout. Things go from bad to worse for the Conservatives as a string of new polls predict they're going to suffer the worst defeat in more than 100 years.
Sir Keir Starmer recruits the help of football star Gary Neville as he sells Labour's vision for the country.
Just Stop Oil causes uproar and condemnation as they target Stonehenge.
Vladimir Putin moves to Vietnam after his first visit to North Korea in over 20 years, signing a new defence pact with the country.
Good morning. Scotland are off the mark at the Euros. We'll reflect on their spirited draw with Switzerland in Cologne after a disastrous opening night last week against Germany. We'll also look ahead to England's clash with Denmark this evening. And in tennis, could Andy Murray be denied a swan song at Wimbledon? More later.
Good morning. It'll be a fine and dry day for many of us, with temperatures approaching the mid-20s. Find out all the details with me a little later on.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
A couple of points. Are you feeling a bit under the weather today?
Oh.
Not you particularly.
No, not me particularly.
But apparently it's the thing, it's in a lot of the papers this morning, that people are going to suddenly start feeling ill at about 2:30 so they can go home and watch the football.
Oh, the football, which I didn't even know was on until about 2 minutes ago.
Oh, give over.
I actually didn't. What time is the game?
Is it in the Star? I can't remember. Oh, here we go. It's at 7 o'clock.
Oh, so you've got time. You can go to work and then go home and watch it.
Yeah, no. Well, no, sorry. The match starts at 5. Beg your pardon.
Oh, I see.
So it's but apparently they reckon about 250,000 people will be struck down with football flu.
Right. Okay.
This afternoon.
So they can get a couple of hours in the pub before.
A couple of hours in the pub, then game starts at 5. But apparently, only 7 million of our 33 million strong workforce have been told they can finish early to watch the action. So there you go. So if you're feeling a bit under the weather today, let us know.
You won't be alone.
We won't dob you in.
And I think lots of people will be feeling under the weather tomorrow morning as well, I'm sure. Sore heads, especially if England do well.
Yes.
Who are they playing? Do you know?
Denmark.
Oh, you're across the detail.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I'll just get it all from Aidan McGee later.
Yeah.
He'll tell me.
And if they win, we're guaranteed place in the last 16.
Well, that's very good, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's very exciting.
I need to put a bet on England, actually.
Oh, do you? Probably a bit late now. Well,
yeah,
it's
the
not,
odds were very good earlier this week, so...
Anyway, right, we mentioned it in the headlines, but just to get you going a bit this morning, Just Stop Oil were at it again, you may have noticed.
Yes, 2 activists have sprayed the historic monument in orange powder just a day, of course, before celebrations begin for the summer solstice. It is 5,000 years old, this landmark, so it's upset so many people, hasn't it? Provoked almost universal condemnation from all areas. Wiltshire Police have confirmed that 2 people have been arrested.
Yes, Stonehenge, of course, we should say. If you can't see, if you're listening on the radio, you can't see what we're talking about.
Stonehenge.
And they were, of course, saying, well, it's only orange cornflower, it'll wash off. But it's worth pointing out that Stonehenge, the people who sort of look after Stonehenge, said it could kill the ancient lichen on the stones.
And apparently it's very rare lichen. So that's to be thought about. English Heritage says the damage is being investigated, but Stonehenge does remain open for the time being. James Cleverly, writing in the Daily Express today, makes a very interesting point, which I think many people are going to agree with, saying, what does spray painting a treasured monument, which is 5,000 years old, have to do with climate change?
It's a very fair point. So there you go. Home Secretary making his point. What about the Prime Minister? His points that he's trying to make over the last couple of weeks don't seem to be getting through to the electorate, because it's going from bad to worse for the PM, with a whole string of new polls out today predicting a Tory wipeout.
Yes, Rishi Sunak could become the first Prime Minister in history to lose his seat at an election, with a Savanta poll for The Telegraph finding that the Conservatives could be reduced to just 53 seats.
The same poll points to Labour winning 516. That gives them a majority of 382, which is obviously huge, double that Tony Blair had in 1997.
Well, let's take a look back at what our politicians got up to on the campaign trail yesterday.
Well, the hard truth is that for millions of people, they're not going to be feeling better off today. Food prices are 25% higher than they were just 2 years ago. And, of course, the average mortgage holder is seeing their mortgage go up by £3,000.
Of course, an independent Scotland, like all countries, would face challenges. Success would not be guaranteed. That would be determined by our own decisions as a country and the choices we make. But when we look at independent European countries similar to Scotland, there are grounds for optimism and hope. Countries like Denmark, Ireland and Sweden are wealthier per head than the United Kingdom.
We have been really clear that we're not raising income tax, national insurance or VAT. All of our plans are fully funded and don't require tax rises over and above what we've already set out. And that is because we're focusing on growing our economy.
If people come here illegally, they shouldn't be able to stay. We need to remove them somewhere else. And if we can get that up and running, then people will stop coming. And multiple other European countries agree with us. That's a choice for people at this election.
If Keir Starmer becomes the Prime Minister, within 6 months, Britain will be at war. I don't mean a proxy war. I don't mean special forces dressed up as Arabs or Russians, Ukrainians. I mean an actual war.
All right, let's get the thoughts of the editor of Spiked, Tom Slater, who's here. Tom, good to see you this morning. We've got to kick off with this Savanta poll in the Telegraph, because if only because when you look at the graphic that they've produced, the entire country is going from pretty much from blue to red.
This is absolutely incredible. I mean, you've already talked about the headline numbers there. 516 seats for Labour, 382 majority. The Tories will be down on 53 seats, put them just 3 seats ahead of the Lib Dems in this particular poll. Interestingly, 0 seats for Reform, which is different to what we've seen in some of the other MRP polls. But at the same time, you can't question the sort of direction of travel. It's worth saying that this is at the kind of bigger end of the expectations for Labour at this point.
Yeah.
But in the context of what we were expecting this election to pan out for, we all knew it was going to be a drubbing for the Conservatives, but we're now in a situation where if they're reduced to a rump of just 100 MPs, that would almost be seen as a relatively good outcome. So unless all of these polls are wrong on a scale that we haven't really seen before, and this type of poll, these mega polls, MRP polls, have a relatively good track record of predicting elections in recent years, unless there's been some screw-up on a scale that we haven't seen before, the Tories are heading for a defeat which is pretty much unprecedented in the modern political era. So this is going to be fascinating to watch.
And this poll also suggests that half of the current cabinet, could lose their seats, including Rishi Sunak.
Including Rishi Sunak. That has never happened before. There's been some close shaves over the years, but this will be the first time ever that you've got a sitting Prime Minister losing his seat. Many of the potential successors would be wiped out. Penny Mordaunt, Grant Shapps, even Robert Jenrick. And it would be a really fascinating question as to what the Tory party would look like after all this. There's a lot of discussion about what the future of Toryism is going to be, but it's not even clear if there's going to be any Tories to lead that discussion.
I mean, I know there's a general sort of direction of travel, but even so, it's still a bit of an outlier poll, this, isn't it? I mean, there's an Ipsos poll out today. I mean, they're using the MRP model as well. I mean, they've got Labour on 453, Conservatives on 115, Labour getting a 256-seat majority. I mean, heck, it sounds like the Tories are doing comparatively well in that one, when you look at these figures.
Absolutely, and there was a YouGov one that was published last night which had the Tories on, you know, a more healthy-looking 108. But we've got to remember that the Tories haven't got any less than 160 seats. You've got to go back to before 1906 for that to take place. That's how long a kind of scope you need to put this into context. And this is a party which, let's not forget, was often talked about as the most successful political party in the democratic world over the past 150 years, spent north of 96 of those years actually in power in some form or another. And it's now just being cast aside in the course of one electoral cycle. This is really historic thing that we're living through, if any of this is even relatively accurate.
I mean, there'll be so many Tories, especially those in the cabinet that we just mentioned, who will be despairing at Rishi Sunak's decision to go early on this. Do you think it would have made a difference if he'd have gone in the autumn? At least then people might have felt the pound in their pocket a bit more.
I think maybe, but at the same time, I do wonder if, given everything that we know now, if any of that would have made that much of a difference. It does feel like the decisive thing has been Farage throwing himself into the race. Clearly, if what he has been saying is to be believed, he would have been in a better position, or he would have been actually better prepped to actually get involved in an autumn election than he would the one that was allegedly sprung on him. But I also think it's worth saying that the writing's been on the wall for some time, and I think it was always just going to take a campaign for just how much of a busted flush the Tories are to reveal itself, and that's what we've ended up with in terms of this campaign. Yeah, but we see we're not getting anything new, are we, in all of this? I mean, there's strategists saying that the Tories should be doing nothing but focusing on Labour. And instead, I mean, today, when we're talking to Michael Gove later on, they're saying, you know, we're going to permanently scrap first-time buyer stamp duty, which is something that's been in place since 2020 anyway. So, I mean, it just seems like a very weak thing to be leading on. You would think so, and you would think that they would really be kind of throwing everything at trying to win back voters at this point. And that's not really what we've seen. You've seen the continuation of quite a cautious sort of campaign. A policy like this is another example of the Tories basically saying, don't worry, we'll clean up the mess that we've already made for ourselves. Please vote for us. It doesn't really work. I mean, the one very thin upside, you could say, is that all of this crazy polling actually does play into their narrative at this point, which is that there is going to be this Labour supermajority. Do you really want Keir Starmer to have a mandate to completely remake the country in his image? Although I don't think many people are quite clear what that would look like. But that's pretty thin gruel to support yourself on, the fact that your message of recent days, please do not reduce us to an absolute rump, because otherwise Labour will be in power forever. If that's your best card to play, it's a reminder of how terribly this campaign has gone for them.
Can I ask you about these bets about the general election dates? Because we had a police officer, didn't we, in the Prime Minister's close protection team, who has been suspended and arrested over alleged bets about the general election. And then, meanwhile, I've also got the second Conservative candidate who's being looked into by the Gambling Commission for the same thing.
It's incredible. So this is Laura Saunders. She's the party's candidate in Bristol North West. And again, we're seeing another one of these instances of someone in and around the Tory party clearly being privy to the Prime Minister's thinking, or maybe just sense where the wind was blowing, and placing a bet on this to the point where the Gambling Commission is having to get involved. And I think it's just... It's been incredible, this campaign, because of the fact that, obviously, some of these things are unforeseen. It's not as if Rishi Sunak has got to surveil everyone around him to make sure they're not up to no good. But it's incredible how what was supposed to be a kind of safe pair of hands campaign has been so dogged by gaffes and scandals. And it's, in a way, it's a footnote to the bigger stories that we're talking about today in terms of just how bad the picture is for them. But how anything like this was allowed to keep happening is pretty incredible, really.
Well, the trouble is with anything like this, if any of it is true, it's just people doing it off their own bat, isn't it? Just thinking, well, I can make myself a few £100 here. So, I mean, how can you possibly stop it?
I suppose that is the case, but I think the problem is when you have a build-up of these cases in the news, in the minds of voters, it will just add to that kind of general kind of stench of corruption or that kind of light sense. And that's the problem with these stories. Even if it's outside of your control, it does...
Which, indeed, it would be with a police protection officer. I mean, that's really nothing to do with any party, is it, really?
But it just keeps... I think it adds to the general kind of air of screw-up amongst the Tory party in this election. It reminds people that he called this election in such a hasty fashion in the first place. So even though, as you say, it's not something that Rishi Sunak could have any control over, it's more bad news in some sort of sense, I suppose, for him.
OK, we shall see you a little bit later on. I mean, it's so much to... there's just so much there, and it's very hard to see it as anything other than a disaster for the Tories. And so, although we didn't talk about reform a huge amount in that, it's fascinating for them that depending on which poll you look at, they could be getting 5 seats, they could be getting 7 seats, they could be getting no seats. How do you possibly tell? Well, you can't at this stage. Tom mentioned Bristol North West. Let's just run through the candidates for that constituency. We've got Scarlett O'Connor for Reform UK, Ben Smith for the Social Democratic Party, Mary Page for the Greens, Darren Jones for Labour, Caroline Gooch for the Lib Dems and Laura Saunders for the Conservatives.
Tom Sater, thank you very much indeed. Now, throughout the campaign, we've been hearing from voters right across the country to get their thoughts on the big issues.
So today we're going to hear from James Hitchcock from Wales.
So I'm coming at this with a great interest in food, farming and nature. It's an issue that is hugely important to all of us, and the decisions that are made in the next 5 years really are going to have an impact for the next 30 years and beyond. We've heard a lot of talk, and there's often a lot of hubris around food security and how we should spend money on supporting farming. It's particularly relevant here in mid Wales because it's very rural economy. 90% of Wales is farmed, and while it's true that Wales has devolved decision-making powers through the Senedd for the environment, which also includes agriculture, that doesn't really make the Westminster elections any less important. There's a huge amount that can be signalled in the form of leadership. While there's mention of plans to invest in nature and commitments to nature in most of the main parties' manifestos, none of them really go far enough. If we were to see fewer woodlands, more polluted rivers, less wildlife, possible and probable that fewer people would come here, and that's less income, less diversification opportunities, and that is a degenerative spiral, where we want a regenerative spiral and a restorative, hopeful future.
Well, that's James's thoughts. We're going to be hearing from lots of GB News viewers throughout the campaign.
Right, let's have a look at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom at 16 minutes past 6.
And the mother of a British teenager who's gone missing in Tenerife says he may have been kidnapped after receiving a Snapchat saying, "Kiss goodbye to your son." Jay Slater from Lancashire was last heard from on Monday morning. The 19-year-old called a friend to say he was lost with no water and his phone was on 1% battery. His last location showed he was in a mountainous region of the island, popular with hikers.
The SNP is promising another referendum on Scottish independence and has unveiled plans to rejoin the EU. Launching their manifesto, John Swinney says he also wants to see an end to the two-child benefit cap.
And the Liberal Democrats have pledged to invest £300 million to fix roads across the country, with a goal to fill in 1.2 million potholes.
Now, the Russian President Vladimir Putin has arrived in Vietnam following his visit to North Korea, where he met the Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un.
Yes, the two leaders have signed a mutual defence pact, which has raised concern among Western leaders, especially over the potential for Russian aid to North Korea's missile or nuclear programmes.
Let's talk to the defence editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Morning, Robert. I mean, look, even just from the headlines, it gets the hairs on the back of your neck going.
Yeah, there's a big problem that we don't really know what Mr. Kim gets in return, apart from a lot of food. It's interesting that they're super militarised, as we could see. A population of 25 million, huge armed forces, starving population. He wants food, he'll want Russian fuel, and the real kicker is what are they exchanging on nuclear technology and missiles. We know what Putin wants, which is just millions of shells, amongst other things, and missiles.
Because Kim Jong-un has said it's strictly peace-loving and defensive in nature, but it's the defensive part that is concerning, isn't it? Because that could mean
only if we're attacked. Oh, yeah. But what Kim Jong-un went on to say was that this is part of the alternative world system. And this is the thing as to why Putin, who doesn't travel much, as we know, has gone to there and gone to Vietnam, which is an old customer, and wants a lot of its old Russian stuff upgraded, whether Russia can do that or not. Russia, China is building a system which they say will be the rival to the rules-based order, which means Western dominance by America, and it is serious. And I think that, in a way, Putin is locking the door prior to another big, now you see me, now you don't, offensive, not only in Ukraine, Moldova. They're up to something. That's what I'm saying. And he knows he's got very little time to do it. He's got to get to a decision point over Ukraine and possibly showing that they have lots of muscle in the Arctic and so on. Talking a lot about maritime power. He's got about 18 months, I think, to keep going at the present rate.
But can I just ask, where this relationship with Kim, where does that leave China and Russia in their relationship?
I think China will be very wary about this, but this is a sort of Game of Thrones conspiracy thing, because I think one of the things that Putin loves, this rather crazy ceremony, is to show that I am still a power. Russia is a great international power. Because in the recent meetings with China, getting the Chinese backing, overt and stated, for Ukraine, which had been a bit iffy up to that point, China made it clear that they are in charge, that they're the boss, they're the big wheel in the penny farthing, and Russia is the little wheel. And if you look at the economies of them, that is absolutely so. Putin resents that because Putin sees Russia as a great international power, the key to Europe, funnily enough, sitting in the middle of Europe and Asia, and that's what a lot of it's about power play. But as Stephen is saying, it's the ugly stuff underneath, because they are working on fancy missiles, on space weapons, I suspect, as well, and that is worrying. And that's where China no friend to the West, may want to put the brakes on some of this, because Kim is a big threat to them, because he threatens, if the thing collapses, which is always a threat of with the North Korean economy, starvation and so on, it's hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of refugees pouring into China, which they do not want.
What could this pact mean for the war in Ukraine?
I think it's just cementing the supply of ammunition. South Korean intelligence said that they had tracked a shipment of containers by rail and by sea, I think, of 4,200,000 shells. It's to keep the supply line going. But if Russia really needs that, boy, things are not so buoyant. And we know 40% of the economy is now devoted to this war. And it was a tremendous boast the other day that Putin, he said, had over 700,000 to 750,000 personnel totally devoted to the special military operation. Well, if that's really so, that's inside Ukraine and on the borders. If that's really so, they ain't doing too well, are they?
Could we see North Korean fighters in Ukraine?
I think that would be very reluctant. But what this does, which is a bit we must talk about, I know we're election focused, and quite rightly, on July the 4th, July the 5th, we will have whatever stripe, a new defence secretary, new prime minister, new foreign secretary. Within 5 days, they've got to go to Washington at a celebratory summit of NATO, 75 years. I don't think the candles will even be lit, let alone blown out, because there is such a big agenda as to what NATO has got to do. And NATO is saying to the UK, actually, you're spending quite a bit on defence, but you're not spending it effectively enough. Get your act together. We need real help with UK leadership, given where France and Germany are politically, in keeping NATO strong, confronting, not threatening, the possible expansion of Russia and Belarus in the war in the East.
Just before we go, because I know we're tight for time, Robert.
Sorry, it's a bit
complicated. No.
It's
but
very complicated.
Because it's so important. The possibility of a Trump presidency in November, how does that play into... Will this strengthen the West in this or not? Because, of course, his relationship with NATO is problematic.
I think there's been a lot of writing about this. I'll be very quick about it. I think, and it will bring charges of the deep state, the military, particularly diplomacy, administration, industry in the US are prepared for this. And they are saying, and quite a substantial section of the Republican Party is saying, no, we go on with Ukraine. We know migration, the Pacific, our worries and major focuses, but this goes on. But they are absolutely sure we want NATO, Europe NATO, to do a lot more. And that's why it's significant that they put a real old pro and twisted his arm to do it, Mark Rutte, in to lead the alliance as the new Secretary-General, Mark Rutte of the Netherlands.
OK. Robert, good to see you. Thanks
you
very much.
Robert, we just had a nice email in about you, so I thought I'd share this with you. This is from Philip Sparrowhawk, who said, Robert Fox should have a 30-minute slot on TV giving a daily update. This is a man who knows his stuff. So there you go.
Chance me a mind thing. Shop now while stocks last.
Thank you, Robert Fox. Always good to see you. Thank you.
All right, it's 24 minutes past 6. Let's get a check on the weather for you with Annie.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Another dry and fine day for many of us. Plenty of warm sunshine, but it is a little bit cloudier in the north and west. Further wet weather is going to arrive here later. For the time being, just a risk of some drizzly rain for the likes of Northern Ireland, far southwest of Scotland, perhaps moving into the far north of Scotland later on today. Elsewhere, though, dry and bright, plenty of sunshine. Maybe a little bit hazy for some of us. We've still got the remnants of a weather front for some central areas of of the UK, but it's going to be feeling warm in that June sunshine. Temperatures approaching the mid-20s for southeastern areas and even across central areas of England as well. So high UV levels, and it is in fact the summer solstice today, so the sun won't be setting till very late. We've got 19 hours of sunlight or daylight across Lerwick today, and somewhere between 19 and 16 hours across the UK. So plenty of sunshine, or time to enjoy the sunshine through today, and it will be a fairly bright end to the day later on today. There's potentially still a little bit more cloud around across Wales and up towards the Humber as well. A risk of some rain, but I think for most of us it's going to be very much a dry day. However, through this evening, as I said, it will turn a bit wetter across the far north or west of Scotland and into Northern Ireland. That's a weather front approaching from the northwest. It's not going to make great progress inland, but it will push into parts of central Scotland later on in the night, bringing cloudier skies for many western areas. So a little bit milder in the west, still fairly fresh though to start the day across eastern areas, but another bright start. There could be some mist and fog around very first thing, but the sunrise is rising around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, so it should clear quite quickly or by the time you are up and about. So through the rest of Friday, a little bit more in the way of cloud compared to Thursday, but still fairly warm in the sunshine, particularly across the south and east, with potentially some wet weather arriving later on in the west. See you later. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, it's time for our giveaway and your chance to win more than £16,000 worth of prizes. It's 15 grand in cash and a load of summer treats.
Yes, it could be yours, but you've got to get a wiggle on. You've got to be in it to win it. Here's all the details that you need.
Don't miss out on your chance to win our Summer Spectacular. And have we got a prize for you? First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Yes, good luck to you. Now, do stay with us. Still to come, Ada McGee will be here to look at the day's top sports news. And there's a small thing of an England game later, isn't there? England v Denmark.
Oh, well done.
At 5 p.m.
5 o'clock. I keep wanting to say 7 o'clock. I don't know why it's 5 o'clock.
It's 5 p.m.
Good afternoon, Britain. Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
98-year-old veteran Ken Cook shared his memories of D-Day at a special event in Harrogate. As a former Green Howards private, Ken was part of an armada of vessels carrying more than 150,000 Allied soldiers to France. And he was just a teenager when his regiment landed on Gold Beach in Normandy.
Everybody was telling us, the officers and the sergeants, corporals, they're telling, get off the beach, lads, quick, because there's some more stuff coming behind us. And they had to get onto the beach as well. All our equipment and tanks and whatever, artillery, they were following up behind us, so we had to get out of the way and get into the countryside and make as much ground as we could on that first day.
Ken survived that harrowing first day, but many didn't. Around 10,000 Allied troops were either killed or injured. But their sacrifice, along with the bravery of those that lived, changed the course of history and resulted in the end of World War II.
Because somebody had to do it, and so we did it. We did our job, and that's it.
Ken is one of the last surviving members of York's Normandy veterans. Part of an ever-dwindling band of brothers who fought on D-Day, he's attending the 80th commemoration in France.
A very emotional occasion this time, because there's not many of us left now.
Remembering the fallen, Ken's wish is that long after he's gone, we still never forget those who gave their tomorrow for our today.
The People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At 6:31, time for the sport. Aidan's here. Morning.
Good morning to you both.
Scotland's pulled it out the bag, sort of.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. And what a difference a few days makes. Because we were here last Saturday, weren't we, just talking about their disastrous start to the tournament. They lost 5-1 to Germany, but they weren't just out-thought in the game against a team that were one of the pre-tournament favourites, the host. They were out-fought, and that's unacceptable, really. When you're a team like Scotland, the basics have to be right. You've got to be aggressive. You've got to do the basics well. They did everything wrong. And, in fact, some would say they were lucky to get away with a 5-1 defeat. Last night, however, some of the basics were back. Yes, there were still a few passes going astray. There were still things that they weren't doing quite right. But, goodness me, they brought Billy Gilmore back into midfield and they looked much, much better, albeit against slightly inferior opponents to Germany. But Switzerland are no mugs at all. I mean, they look like they're going to go through now on 4 points. And so, as I say, a few days makes a huge difference because now, from being pilloried and being lampooned from pillar to post, they're now on the verge of immortality because Scotland have never qualified from a group stage of a tournament. I would argue that this game against Hungary is their biggest match in a generation. They have a huge, huge opportunity to get into the knockout stages. And, as I say, that's why football is the game that it is, because just in a short period of time you can transform your fortunes, and they didn't even win the game.
No. Well, fingered. What are their chances against Hungary?
I'd say they were pretty good. I mean, look, they're a side that don't score many goals, Scotland, so you can't take anything for granted whatsoever. But they need to win 1-0. That would put them on 4 points if they did that. And I think they would probably have a good chance of going through as one of the best third-place teams. However, Switzerland could lose against Germany quite easily. So Germany could go to 9 points, Switzerland stay on 4. Then it comes down to goal difference, and I think that Scotland would still finish third. But third would probably take them up, I would have thought. So they're in a much better place than they were a few days ago. The Tartan Army were in full flow last night in Cologne, and as I say, they'll be feeling much, much better about themselves this morning.
Should we talk about the England game?
5 o'clock, yeah, a bit awkward for a lot of people. This is going to be a bit of a rush back from work.
Yeah, they're all skiving off. They're all going to skive off.
Well, yeah, probably. There was a famous one in, I think it was Euro 2012. There were the Ireland fans, the Germany fans, I think it was, held up a banner saying Angela Merkel thinks we're at work. Yeah. So, bit of a 2012 joke there. But, yeah...
21% of the UK's workforce are going to try and skive off early.
Yeah, probably. That's normal. I remember watching England v Argentina in 2002 in a civil service pub in the middle of town. It was absolutely packed.
Yeah.
It was, that was about... I think
that's the civil servants. They don't got the office anyway.
Yeah, but that was at 8:30 in the morning.
Oh.
So I suppose they should have been on their commute, really. But that was then. But, no, I mean, look, the England games are absolutely huge. I mean, bigger than any club game. The pressure is a different level as well. If England win tonight, there's a huge incentive because it means in the third game they do have the luxury, if they want it, to rest players. And that's crucial in a tournament like this because you don't get much break between a game. You do run the risk of, obviously, losing your place at the top of the table, which means that you could face the top team in another group, so you potentially give yourself a tougher draw in the next round. But the issue tonight for England is going to be selection. Does he stick? Now, all the reports this morning in the papers are saying that England are going to be unchanged. So the issue is Phil Foden. Can they get the best out of him coming in off the left? Can you remove Saka? Well, not really, because he's playing very well for Arsenal. You've got Jude Bellingham in the middle, playing extremely well at the age of 20 years old. Harry Kane, I think, there's room for improvement from him.
To be fair, though, there was room for improvement from all of them after the first half hour.
You went and watched this game, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
Jude Bellingham was quite good, to be fair.
Yeah, he was. But they were all right in the first half hour. I mean,
they were.
But then it all just went to pot.
Well, I wouldn't say went to pot. I just think you have to respect the opponents. Sometimes we don't know enough about teams like Serbia until they turn up to the tournament. It's not. You can look at them as individuals, but then when they get together, they're better than the sum of their parts. That's what international football is about. In fact, it's what all football is about. So it's not as easy as just swatting away these teams by 4 or 5 goals. You just can't do that anymore in international football. And so Serbia were decent. They caused us a few problems. They didn't really create any major chances. But I don't think England will play that badly after minute 30 again tonight. I think there's a huge incentive. Denmark are not the side who got to the semi-finals against England 3 years ago, Ellie. They have three of their key players. You look at people like Simon Kjær, Kasper Schmeichel, for example, Christian Eriksen. They're all 3 years older. Some of their players have left the scene as well. Simon Kjær isn't even playing, the captain. Simon Kjær was the guy who, if you remember when Christian Eriksen had the heart attack 3 years ago, he was the one who brought the players around him. Really inspirational bloke, actually. He brought the players around him so the cameras couldn't see his moment of distress. And so he's a key player, both in terms of his personality and his ability. He's not around tonight. But I expect England to go through, I really do. Rasmus Højlund's a key player for them. He was the player at Man United last season. He flattered to deceive a little bit, but his record for Denmark is not too bad. So, as I say, I don't think the kick-off time really matters. I think there's loads of England fans there down in Frankfurt, and my money is on an England win, and not just... I don't use the money reference just because I'm in Frankfurt. That's what I honestly believe.
Right, oh, well. We shall see.
And shall we have a quick look at the tennis? Andy Murray, will he make Wimbledon?
I'm not sure. His back injury is just so difficult, Ellie, and the way he plays the game... I said that he would have these problems at the end of his career when he was in his prime, because his game is so aggressive and it was so labour-intensive on his joints, and I think the back is very risky. He's got a scan today, so it's all going to come on to that. I mean, look, he may not be able to say goodbye at Wimbledon, but it's possible he could go to the Olympics in August, so that's when we could see the last of him. I don't think it's the end, but I don't think he would pull out of Queen's that easily. And we all want to see him in front of a home crowd at Wimbledon. It'd be wonderful, wouldn't it, if we could actually see him there and make a final appearance. But yeah, he had to retire with the back injury with Jordan Thompson. But there's hope. Yeah, he doesn't give up, does he?
No. I don't know why they keep going though. When you get like that and you put yourself through all that trouble, Well,
that's what he's doing, really, isn't it?
Yeah, sit back and count the money.
Yeah, I know. It'd be a long time doing that.
Yeah, well, fair enough. There's something to do till proper retirement age. Lovely stuff, Aidan. Thank you. We'll see you a little bit later on.
Thank you very much. Now, do stay with us. Charlie Rowley and Emma Burnell will be here to talk through the papers with us. That's next.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Delays are possible again today to Calmac Inner Hebrides sailings for operational reasons. In Lincolnshire, it's day 2 of the Lincolnshire show, so delays are expected with gates opening at 8 o'clock this morning. Parts of the A15 are closed to all but show traffic. On the M26 in Kent, there are westbound queues already this morning, heading on to the M25 at Junction 5 because of lane closures for roadworks. Also in Kent, it's slow on the A249 southbound towards roadworks just before junction 5 of the M2 at the Stockbury roundabout. In West Sussex on the A27 there's a lane closed westbound again today, along with the exit to the A283 at Shoreham for emergency bridge repairs, and in Devon on the A30 there's a lane closed westbound for repairs between Stoford Cross and the Lifton Down turnoff. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The new BBC Director of Sport, who's a man called Alex K. Jelski, who's downplayed fears raised by sports women about biological men competing in female categories. And he's also called Martina Navratilova, I've got to say, has to be probably the most successful woman tennis player in history, and a very brave woman too. She escaped the Iron Curtain and she came out. And Sharon Davis, he says, are not experts on the issue.
At the same time, transgender US swimmer Leah Thomas has lost her legal battle and been told that she cannot compete at the Olympics.
So Leah Thomas made an appeal to World Aquatics, who have this rule in place that says that they protect the female category, as does athletics and world cycling. And because Leah doesn't actually qualify, because Leah isn't training, so she's not even someone that would be potentially part of the Olympic team. They've just said that, you don't qualify to be able to bring this case. It's been thrown out on a technicality, thank goodness, and which means that, swimming will not have any males beating elite females in Paris this summer, which was particularly good for me, bearing in mind that I now have to be very careful about what I'm allowed to say and not say. We're not allowed to use the words biological male, transitioned male. I mean, just every single possible way that we could explain that the person in the race wasn't a female, and it only affects women. It doesn't affect men. Females that identify as male are no risk to men's sport in any shape or form. It's just women that are losing their opportunities. The thing I take the most offence to, and this is very serious, and this needs to be dealt with by the BBC, and this is why I wrote to Tim Davie. In that article, he compared males that are identifying as women in women's sport to Jamaican and Ethiopian females being allowed to compete.
What?
The People's Channel.
"6:41, morning to you. Let's have a look at some of the newspapers for you today.
And the Daily Telegraph predicts a Tory wipeout, according to a new Savanta poll.
The Times has their own poll predicting the Tories will suffer their worst defeat in 100 years.
While the Guardian looks to Labour as Rachel Reeves pledges to end the gender pay gap.
The Daily Mail calls out Just Stop Oil protesters for their attacks on Stonehenge.
Well, joining us now to go through what's making the news this morning is former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, and journalist and playwright Emma Burnell. Very good morning to you both.
Morning.
Morning.
And Emma, let's start with you, shall we? And this is about Rachel Reeves vowing to close the gender pay gap once and for all.
Yeah, I think this is a really important priority. I think Labour women particularly have been pushing this through the various policy mechanisms within the party, and it's always been something that Rachel Reeves has highlighted herself. I think there's research from the TUC that says at the current rate of closure it would take over 20 years to close the difference between hourly pay rates between men and women. So she's proposing things like flexible working as a default to allow far more people to have access to the workplace, but in ways that work around. Because as we know, despite the fact that we have things like shared parental leave and things like that, the bulk of childcare and caring leave at the other end of life does tend to fall on women, and that flexible working will make that much, much easier for them.
But this is where I don't know how you begin to tackle it, because people will look at this and go, gender pay gap is about men and women doing the same job for different amounts of money, which it isn't.
No.
Gender pay gap is saying women as a whole in a company are earning less than them. So if you've got, a couple of men who are at the top of a company on very big salaries, then it skews the entire company's gender pay gap thing.
So the reporting is only for very, very large companies, in which case that should be statistically different. So if you're a company over 250 employees, one employee at the top skewing it, whether they're male or female, shouldn't make that much difference. It's about where they sit and how many of the people they have going into the higher bands of work and higher bands of pay. So in terms of reporting and having to have a closure plan, that's only for larger companies. Flexible working will be for everybody. And that's what's really important, because it is often those jobs at the lower end of the pay scale that make it much, much harder to go into the workforce in the first place. And they are the ones that women tend to pick up, particularly women with young children.
OK.
I mean, it's interesting. There's a line in the piece which says, with Guardian, that the Shadow Chancellor wanted to shatter the last glass ceiling in politics, which I would have thought would be the Labour Party actually electing a female leader. And
you're not wrong. You're absolutely
having
not wrong.
a Labour leader and perhaps a Labour Prime Minister that's a female in the Labour Party. But if they want to talk about equality, they've only had, straight white men.
Having the first female Chancellor, which, if they win the election, and we've seen the front pages, would be a first, which would be fantastic. But, I mean, I freely agree with you, Charlie. Even as somebody who is a very, very staunch Labour supporter, I have taken my party to task over this several times.
OK. You say it looks like there is going to be, anyway, a Labour Prime Minister come the 5th of July. Charlie, if we look at the latest polls...
Well, they're not good. Claxon, the understatement of the century. They're not good. And Look, the Tory strategy seems to have changed in the last couple of days to put the focus on, look, you know, a Labour supermajority would be bad for Britain, it'd be bad
Which is an admission of losing.
Which is not the way in which I would have wanted to see the campaign go, absolutely. And I think this is playing into that. But I do think in a funny way, and we were talking about this sort of earlier on just outside, I don't feel that there's this necessary groundswell of sympathy vote that's now going to come out for the Tories. But I do think there is an issue where you don't actually... you might hate the Tories and you might hate everything that's happened over the last 14 years and you want to just kick them out. But that doesn't mean, or that doesn't translate still into this big sort of support and populism for Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. So if you're faced with the fact of, OK, the Tories are going to lose anyway, if you bought that narrative and you're sort of happy with that, that's absolutely fine. That doesn't necessarily make you then come out to vote for the Labour Party. And that can have an impact on, well, obviously turnout will be low, that can have an impact on the seats, that can actually restrain and refrain this big supermajority from taking place. So I think, you know, the polling companies have got a lot of work to do because some of them are coming up with quite different projections. But I wouldn't want to be sitting at CCHQ during this campaign thinking, oh, wonderful, this poll's come out and that will help us, our narrative to stop the Labour majority.
Take a step back, Emma, right? Even as a Labour supporter, it's not healthy for democracy, is it, to have one party with such a huge majority? You need a strong, proper opposition, don't you?
You need oppositional voices. That's
That's not what was being said by Labour when you've been in opposition. You said we need a strong opposition.
We need a strong opposition in Parliament, but I really do want to take to task this concept of a supermajority because it's actually an American concept and it has a very specific context because in the American Senate, in order to pass most legislation, you have to have 60 senators, and that's what's meant by the term supermajority. In the UK Parliament, one vote, 600 votes. It doesn't make any difference. If that's how much you win by, that's your legislation passes. So the idea that there is a concept in British democracy of a supermajority is actually just nonsense. It's a word that we've imported from America and misused.
No, but the idea is that if there is an absolutely massive majority in Parliament, then what that means is Labour will be much bolder, much stronger, with less opposition to get through anything that it wants. Whereas if it's got to fight to win over those rebels within their own party, which normally people have to do, then it means you are a little bit more cautious, a little bit more middle of the road.
I mean, I think there will still be rebellious voices within the Labour Party. They are, after all, the Labour Party. It's sort of what they do. I think that I think scrutiny in Parliament is really important. One of the things that I've criticised this government about is not giving nearly enough time to legislative scrutiny. But again, I just come back to the idea that if the government can pass a piece of legislation by one vote, it can pass. It doesn't make a difference. And the idea of a supermajority is not a concept in British democracy. And I just think it's important that we say there is a difference between, yes, it is absolutely essential that legislation is properly scrutinised, questioned, that there are people with different ideological perspectives who have the right and the position to do that. That is not the same as the concept of a supermajority.
I mean, the polling also, which is interesting, you know, the Prime Minister might lose his seat.
Yeah. Half the cabinet
might lose their seat. It's going to be a real sort of change. I mean, if that does happen, I mean, that would be, you know, historic and obviously cataclysmic.
What do you expect to happen? Again,
yes.
Taking a step back,
yes.
When you look at all this, what would you expect to see?
I don't think the Prime Minister will lose his seat because even at the function that I was at yesterday afternoon, where people, and, you know, have been out on the doorstep and, you know, are reporting that actually it's not as, you know, I mean, it's not good, but it's not as bad as sometimes as what is being made out. And if you look at someone actually very, you know, pointedly, if you're more geeky than I am when it comes to politics, we're looking at recent by-elections, for council by-elections, just in the last few months. And, you know, the vote is holding up in certain places where you would expect it obviously not to, if you're going to believe everything that you see on the front pages. So I don't believe the poll that the Prime Minister in his Richmond, North Yorkshire seat is going to lose. I don't think that. I think some of the Cabinet clearly are at risk because of those...
I think in terms of, for a non-partisan point, as Stephen has been pushing me to make one, I do think one of the worries is that if you lose that much experienced MPs from Parliament, that will have far more of effect on the ability to scrutinise than any sort of numbers game. I think that actually might be, in terms of where the Conservatives go next and how effective they are as an opposition, if they're in opposition, don't take anything for granted, then I think that not having, losing an awful lot of their experienced parliamentarians who understand the system would be a bigger problem.
Emma, let's stay with you, shall we, and talk about... Oh, no, should we mention this first?
Yes. Just because...
Oh, sorry,
Charlie very helpfully mentioned the Prime Minister's constituency that the Prime Minister's standing in. Therefore, we have to tell you exactly who's standing.
Yes, there are 13 candidates standing in Richmond and Northallerton. They are Jason Barnett for the Independent Party, Count Binface for the Count Binface Party, Daniel George Callaghan for the Liberal Democrats, Angie Campion for Independent.
Louise Ann Dickens for the Workers' Party of Britain, Kevin Foster for the Green Party, Rio Goldhammer for the Yorkshire Party, Nico Omilano, who's an independent, Brian Neil Richmond, who's an independent.
Sir Archibald Stanton, the official monster-raving loony party, Rishi Sunak, Conservative and Unionist Party, Lee Martin Taylor, Reform UK, Tom Wilson, the Labour Party.
So there you go.
Emma.
Right.
Just Stop Oil and spraying orange powder paint all over Stonehenge yesterday.
Oh, I just despair. I'm such a staunch environmentalist. I believe the same things they believe, and I just want to scream in their faces, stop doing this, you're hurting my cause. You see those pictures of that beautiful, beautiful natural environment. And, of course, they've done this on the eve of the summer solstice, where, for those who follow the Druidic way of life, that is a really, really important monument and moment. And now, of course, it's going to have beefed-up security. It's covered in orange blooming paint. It just feels... so, I do not understand the theory of change, which is a campaigning concept where you go, from this action, we will have this outcome. I don't get where you're going to get what you want out of it.
These people are utterly bonkers. They are crackpots, they are lunatics. These are people that need to be rounded up and banged up in prison because they constantly go around disrupting the lives of ordinary working people across this country. They go around defacing monuments like we've seen yesterday at Stonehenge. What is their problem? You know, there clearly something is wrong there, that they feel so entitled in society and in life to go about this kind of way, disrupting our lives, as I said before, defacing all of our public landmarks. You know, that is... And they're not, you know, these aren't people with, you know, these are middle-class people, you know, you would expect, you know, people are actually quite well-educated, but they think, as Emma rightly said, you know, think as though that this is going to attract people to their cause. Which,
Do they? Do they, though? I don't know.
Well, they clearly do. Or
Is that what they're trying to
make
do, or are they
headlines.
trying to do exactly what we're doing now, which is talk about them?
But how on earth can you be talked about in such a way with such, you know, hate, effectively, for this Just Stop Oil mob, as they are, look, disrupting a brilliant West End theatre show there. I just think it is, you know, these people, they're going to continue. If the laws aren't tightened in some way, if actually you don't, you know, we all have a right to protest in this country, and that's absolutely, and you can be celebrating things like Pride with flags and all the rest of it. That is absolutely something that we should be celebrating. But going about this kind of activity, using these kinds of tactics, is abominable.
I mean, there is a concept in campaigning of raising the profile of an issue. But the problem is we're not talking about the issue, we're talking about Just Stop Oil.
Yeah, OK.
And a
fair
rare
point.
united front from Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer on this one. Let us know what you think. Let's have a look at the weather now with Annie.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Another dry and fine day for many of us. Plenty of warm sunshine, but it is a little bit cloudier in the north and west. Further wet weather is going to arrive here later. For the time being, just a risk of some drizzly rain for the likes of Northern Ireland, far southwest of Scotland, perhaps moving into the far north of Scotland later on today. Elsewhere though, dry and bright, plenty of sunshine. Maybe a little bit hazy for some of us. We've still got the remnants of a weather front for some central areas of the UK, but it's going to be feeling warm in that June sunshine. Temperatures approaching the mid-20s for southeastern areas and even across central areas of England as well. So high UV levels, and it is in fact the summer solstice today, so the sun won't be setting till very late. We've got 19 hours of sunlight or daylight across Lerwick today, and somewhere between 19 and 16 hours across the UK. So plenty of sunshine, or time to enjoy the sunshine through today, and it will be a fairly bright end to the day later on today. There's potentially still a little bit more cloud around across Wales and up towards the Humber as well. A risk of some rain, but I think for most of us it's going to be very much a dry day. However, through this evening, as I said, it will turn a bit wetter across the far north or west of Scotland and into Northern Ireland. That's a weather front approaching from the northwest. It's not going to make great progress inland, but it will push into parts of central Scotland later on in the night, bringing cloudier skies up for many western areas. So a little bit milder in the west, still fairly fresh though to start the day across eastern areas, but another bright start. There could be some mist and fog around very first thing, but the sunrise is rising around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, so it should clear quite quickly or by the time you are up and about. So through the rest of Friday, a little bit more in the way of cloud compared to Thursday, but still fairly warm in the sunshine, particularly across the south and east, with potentially some wet weather arriving later on in the west. See you later. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Delays are possible again this morning to Calmac in a Hebrides sailings for operational reasons. In Lincolnshire, it's day 2 of the Lincolnshire show. Parts of the A15 are closed to all but show traffic. Gates opening at 8 o'clock this morning. We're expecting that to get very busy as we head further in towards the morning rush. Now, transport for Wales and Great Western rail services have been stopped between Port Talbot Parkway and Pyle because of a trespass incident. In London on the A13, the inside lanes closed westbound where a lorry's broken down at the Lodge Avenue flyover at Barking, with queues towards there from Marsh Way Dagenham. On the M26 in Kent, there are westbound queues getting onto the M25 again this morning because of roadworks. And also in Kent on the A249, there are southbound queues towards roadworks just before junction 5 of the M2 at the Stockley roundabout at Sittingbourne. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Don't miss out on your chance to win our Summer Spectacular. And have we got a prize for you? First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody
in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
Morning to you, it's 7 o'clock on Thursday, the 20th of June. Today, a Tory wipeout. Things go from bad to worse for the Conservatives as a string of new polls predict they're set to suffer their worst defeat in 100 years.
Sir Keir Starmer recruits the help of football star Gary Neville as he sells Labour's vision for the country.
The search intensifies for a missing teen in Tenerife as his mum reveals the horrifying Snapchat she got when he disappeared.
And Just Stop Oil causes uproar and condemnation as they target Stonehenge with orange powder.
It's a 5 o'clock showdown for England as they take on Denmark in Frankfurt. But will Gareth Southgate stick or twist when he names his starting 11? And what a difference a few days makes for Scotland. Their draw with Switzerland last night has left them on the brink of history.
Good morning. It'll be a fine and dry day for many of us with temperatures approaching the mid-20s. Find out all the details with me a little later on.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Any nice views, Ellie?
I saw one earlier, and I'm not going to be able to dig it out now, but if it's yours, thank you for your message. And it essentially said that if the polls are to be believed, then we're going to see the country go from blue to red, just like on the front page of the Telegraph this morning. And somebody messaged us in saying, the polls are not always to be believed. Look at Brexit. And they think it will be a more light shade of blue. So thank you to that person whoever emailed that in.
Yeah, I mean, the problem you've got is, and you always say it in the run-up to an election, is the longer the election goes on, the more the polls narrow. Mm-hmm. And the problem with this one is they're not yet. And that's got to be really concerning because it should narrow. It will probably narrow on the day, but even so, I mean, this should be a massive outlier poll, and it's not really. It is going from bad to worse.
Yeah, and the Telegraph suggests with this poll that the Tories would be left with just 53 MPs. Archie Henderson's been in touch saying if that's to be believed and the Conservatives would only have 53 MPs, that means there won't be any debates. They couldn't even fill a front bench with that number. They would really struggle. And that's the point you were making about democracy.
Yeah, well, you need
a strong opposition.
You need a strong opposition. I mean, look, it would... what does it give them? Where's my list? 516 seats out of what, 650. So there would be... I can't remember. That's my maths gone out the window. But, I mean, the benches, the opposition benches, would have plenty of people on them, just not from one party. Mind you, that's why you'd put all the Labour MPs, because they're not all going to fit on the other side. I don't know. I mean, heck.
It's a logistical issue on top of everything else, yeah.
It would be absolutely unprecedented. And when you look at it, when we know that there isn't that much enthusiasm for Keir Starmer in all of this, you've got to say, what is happening? What is happening that there's not that much enthusiasm for Labour? Is it just simply that everyone is absolutely fed up with the Tories after 14 years?
Or is the right-wing vote split?
Well, I was going to say that's obviously a significant part of it, that a lot of that vote is being taken away from the Tories by Reform UK. But I don't know, it's a very odd time to be living in. Anyway, as we digest all of this, let's see what the politicians got up to on the campaign trail yesterday.
Well, the hard truth is that for millions of people, they're not going to be feeling better off today. Food prices are 25% higher than they were just 2 years ago. And, of course, the average mortgage holder is seeing their mortgage go up by £3,000.
Of course, an independent Scotland, like all countries, would face challenges. Success would not be guaranteed. That would be determined by our own decisions as a country and the choices we make. But when we look at independent European countries similar to Scotland, there are grounds for optimism and hope. Countries like Denmark, Ireland and Sweden are wealthier per head than the United Kingdom.
We have been really clear that we're not raising income tax, national insurance or VAT. All of our plans are fully funded and don't require tax rises over and above what we've already set out. And that is because we're focusing on growing our economy.
If people come here illegally, they shouldn't be able to stay. We need to remove them somewhere else. And if we can get that up and running, then people will stop coming. And multiple other European countries agree with us. That's a choice for people at this election.
If Keir Starmer becomes the Prime Minister, within 6 months, Britain will be at war. I don't mean a proxy war. I don't mean special forces dressed up as Arabs or Russians, Ukrainians. I mean an actual war.
Heck. All right, let's get the thoughts of Tom Slater, the editor of Spiked. Morning to you, Tom.
Morning.
Heck, I feel like we've been talking to you for hours already today somehow. There's just so much to get through. All right, as I was saying in the introduction there, how seriously do you take these polls?
Well, it is worth saying that the procession of polls that we've seen, which are projecting these incredible historic drubbings. I mean, this Savanta poll that we're talking about, Tories reduced down to 53 seats. That's probably at the lower end of the estimates. We've seen anything between kind of 150 and 50. But it's worth saying that at the beginning of this campaign, people were talking about 1997 as a parallel, John Major being sent into opposition, about 165 MPs, and how that would be a terrible drubbing for the Conservative Party. That's now essentially the optimistic end of the spectrum. And these polls, it's worth saying, these are what they call kind of multi-level regression and post-stratification polls, MRP polls. It's tens of thousands of people are polled for them, and they project onto each individual seat. So these things are never an exact science, but they've got a much better track record in recent years than some of the other polling that around Brexit or other things that people could talk about. There's every chance that this could be wrong. There's every chance that things could move. Things are very volatile, which is why we've gone from a pretty significant Tory majority to talks of a Labour enormous majority in the space of just 5 years. But at the same time, I don't think anyone could suggest, looking at any of this, could see anything other than a historic defeat for the Tory party. It's just on what scale of a historic defeat that we're talking about, it seems like.
And what do the polls suggest about reform and perhaps what they're doing to split the right-hand vote?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it does look like, if you look at just the headline voting intention numbers, in some polls they're drawing even with the Conservatives, edging towards 20% of the vote. In others, they're lower, but regardless, you're kind of looking at the fact that put together, they might be within single digits of Labour. So the way in which the right-wing vote is splitting is pretty clear. But at the same time, it's not obvious to me that there would be any route to reuniting these voters, certainly not at this election. I think the one card the Tories can play, and it's a pretty thin silver lining, really, is all of these projections which suggest how terrible things are will be grist to their mill of you can't waste your vote on reform, you're going to hand Labour this supermajority. But that's a pretty bad card to play, I think. Reform are definitely taking votes off them, but I think there's a general sense that the Tories deserve this drubbing. And I think this was going to be delivered to them anyway. Reform have just accelerated that process to the scale that we're talking about.
It just seems just very odd that we're talking about something which is potentially absolutely historic, unprecedented, and yet with actually not a great deal of obvious enthusiasm for the Labour Party. The potential of actually Labour's share of the vote being comparatively low, because turnout looks like it's going to be low and all the rest of it. So it's all absolutely counterintuitive.
Absolutely. And it's worth saying that even with these crazy numbers, these crazy majorities that we're talking about, we've got to remember this is a Labour Party that refuses to say really what it stands for, that is led by a man with all of the charisma of a draft excluder, that if you look at the polls and the focus groups, there's very little enthusiasm for him whatsoever. But I think they're the beneficiaries of a very anti-politics mood, an anti-Westminster mood. The Tories have been the primary targets of that. Labour have been the primary beneficiaries, but they won't be riding into power because of a sense of enthusiasm, because of a sense of change, because of a sense of we really back this programme that Keir Starmer's laying out. But I think it is worth remembering that things are very, very volatile. The reason that we've had elections drastically careen from one party to the other, it seems like, is because Tories and Labour used to have a very defined social base, whether it's the working class or the kind of middle classes and upper in terms of the Tory party. Over the course of the past 10 years, that base has frayed in different ways. And as a consequence of that, things are just up for grabs in the way they weren't previously. But it is worth stressing your point, Stephen, that this is something we've just never seen. You've got to go back to 1906 just for the Tories to do worse than 160 seats. And again, that's at the optimistic end of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and according to this poll, the Prime Minister could lose his seat.
Which has
In fact,
never
half the
happened before.
cabinet could lose their seat. Yeah, and that hasn't happened before.
Absolutely, and that's one of the fascinating things about what will be the kind of next phase for the Conservative Party when they pick up the pieces, is that many of the big leadership candidates that people have been talking about, Penny Mordaunt, Grant Shapps, Robert Jenrick, all of these people are very likely to lose their seats if these polls are even relatively accurate. So there's a big question about who will even be present in Parliament to have that debate about the future of Toryism, and we'll open a lot of questions about, is a merging of Reform and the Conservatives firmly back on the table now, because it's going to be a much more tempting possibility.
Is there a possibility of instability over the course of the next Parliament? In the sense that if there's not a huge enthusiasm for Labour, then that surely is going to mean there's at least a potential for a lot of people to sort of say quite quickly, well, we're not happy with how this is going.
I think that's exactly right. I think Keir Starmer will have the shortest honeymoon period in history because, exactly as you're saying, there is not great enthusiasm for him. I think also it's not clear to anyone that he has the answers to the problems that are confronting us. There's also the fact that he's being very evasive about some of the moves he might have to take in order to kind of stabilise the public finances and so on. He's going to have to make unpopular decisions, and he's already not particularly popular. So in that context, I think you could see things start to change pretty quickly. But the problem is, if you've got an election defeat for the Tories on the scale that we're talking about, it will take them a very long time and probably would involve them turning into a slightly different kind of animal for them to get anywhere near power again. So even if Labour becomes quite unpopular quite quickly, you don't recover from a defeat like that in the space of one electoral cycle. Having said that, so many precedents have been broken in recent years. You don't want to bet against anything in particular.
I mean, if the polls are to be believed, there's going to be a Tory wipeout in 2 weeks' time. Is there anything that the Tory party can do now to reverse any of that damage, do you think?
It is almost inconceivable that there's anything that they could do to change this. I think the die has been cast for some time now. There's been a sense that this Tory party not only squandered the opportunity of both Brexit in 2019 to carve out this new coalition, this new base for themselves, but also that they've just been completely vapid, offering absolutely nothing. I mean, all of the announcements that they thought would try to kind of shift things in their direction have become running jokes of this campaign, whether we're talking about national service or any of these other things. And also a lot of completely unprovoked errors like the D-Day debacle. So it's inconceivable that there's anything that they could do to turn things around. Also, Rishi Sunak is such a cautious politician. I don't think it would even be in his DNA to try and attempt something drastic to turn things around at the last minute.
Yeah. Well, anything, if you do try that now, it just looks like a gimmick.
That's desperate.
Yeah, that's the problem. We're talking to Michael Gove a little bit later on, so we'll get his take on all of this. For now, Tom, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Tom.
Now, the Bank of England is going to face one of its most pressing decisions in months, so we're told. The rate of inflation is down to 2%. Now, that is actually meeting their target for the first time since 2021.
However, the Monetary Policy Committee are expected to hold interest rates at 5.25% until at least after the general election.
Let's talk to former advisor to the Bank of England, Roger Gewell, who's here. Good to see you, Roger.
Good to see you.
I mean, look, everyone's going, we're hitting the targets. Why are interest rates, base rates, not coming down?
Well, if I may, this is very much tied to, related to, and a part of what you and Tom have just been discussing. I mean, everything that each of you, particularly Tom, has said is absolutely true. And I'd like to preface my comments by referring to a fairly wild prediction that I went public with yesterday on social media, which is that the only way to synthesize all of these ridiculous factors that we're living with today, where we have a choice between continued incompetence and serious irresponsibility, whereas one of my followers posted a choice between stepping in dog muck and cat muck. The only way to reconcile those, and I've posted on X, formerly Twitter, with a video, is for Nigel Farage and Reform to merge with the Tories. And I've predicted a 60 to 70% chance of that happening within the next 14 days. And when you merge with Nigel, You
don't. In the next vote, so pre-election.
Exactly, because otherwise they are going to be wiped out, as I think Tom was alluding to, for generations. I used to receive 2 to 3 conspiracy theory letters per month. I'm now being deluged with Dr. Roger, wake up, smell the coffee. No one, but no one, can be this stupid. This is a conspiracy. This is Davos. This is the Illuminati. This is the Jews. This is the Muslims. This is Lord knows who, one after the Martians. But they all say the same thing. Now, the Bank of England is part of it. We have had, for some years, what's called cost push inflation. And I've spoken about this on this program and many others many, many times, to the point where I wonder why I'm still talking about it. It's non-consumer driven inflation. There's 2 kinds.
Which means hiking interest rates doesn't bring it down.
No, hiking interest rates in that scenario inflates the inflation and prolongs the time by which it falls by itself, as it has since wheat started to grow in ancient biblical Egypt again. Our food and energy and other prices would have come down long ago, but for those 14 ridiculous interest rates, which frankly have wrecked the British economy. Tens of millions of households. There are 500,000 businesses about to go to the wall. Every day I'm contacted with stories of businesses whose borrowings, wait a minute, Dr. Roger, 5.25% is not, really? Read the report of Leeds Building Society and others that is the equivalent of a 20 to 25% interest rate in the 80s and 90s, given all the difference in the factors. The Baleosaurus, because I call him that, he's so thick-skinned, he won't listen to anybody, has a litany of bad judgment behind him. His monetary policy committee, but one, are sycophantic. They were criticized only a couple of months ago by the House of Lords Economic Affairs Committee. Your software is out of date. It's defective. Your methods are defective. You've botched monetary policy and controlling inflation. You've got groupthink, so nobody is allowed to disagree with you. You must change. What's happened? Nothing. Bailey went out and got his friend Bernanke, the former head of the Federal Reserve, to come over and check their homework, if you will. And everybody yelled cronyism. Why didn't you get Andy Haldane, the former chief economist of the bank for 30 years, who's right here in Britain? Well, that's because he doesn't think you should have been raising interest rates. Bernanke, instead of cronyism, takes a look, issues his report, and says, this is so bad that he actually drops his friend in it and says, your software doesn't work, your forecasts are horrible, the way you've handled inflation is dreadful, you've got groupthink, same thing as the Lord. Still nothing has happened. Still, fishy Rishi Sunak and Bates Motel Hunt, who, by the way, has not worked 24 hours in his life in any job involving money, finance, or banking, sit there and cheer on Bailey. We're fighting inflation. They're not. They're prolonging it. Finally, how does raising interest rates or keeping them level affect food prices, affect energy prices, and have anything to do with Houthis firing on shipping in the Red Sea?
Heck, Roger. I mean, the problem with all of that is, what is so confusing, I was going to say frustrating, but confusing is better, really, is that you've made these points time and time again, and when you explain them, it makes absolute perfect sense. However, if you're right, how can you be right in all of this and the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee, which is meant to be the group of experts, all be wrong?
Because as the Lords has said, and even as the Baleosaurus's bosom buddy, Ben Bernanke, said, you suffer from groupthink. You think diversity is having women and non-binary folks and people of color and this and no, diversity is people who disagree with you. There's nobody there except Ms. Dhingra who disagrees with them. He's surrounded by sycophants. He did the same thing at the Financial Conduct Authority, his previous job, where he is alleged in the Woodford scandal and the London and Capital debacle to have lost billions and hundreds of billions of pounds for investors by not acting when he should have and acting too late. I don't know how he got his job. My friend Alex Brummer, the longtime city editor of The Mail, said in an exclusive interview with me a few years ago, Mr. Bailey is not an economist and does not have the intellectual capacity for the job. That's on tape, anybody wants to see it. I mean, God knows what he's doing there, but he has been destroying this country for several years. Would you send a football manager onto the pitch for the 14th game with the playbook he used to lose the last 13? I mean, why couldn't they see that nobody's stopping him? And that's Sunak and Hunt, and instead they're cheering him on. Why?
But how could they stop him when it's all in? I mean,
yeah, because Gordon Brown gave him total independence in 1997. There are still ways, you know, politics is all about compromise. If you do this, we'll do that. But, you know, we're living, as Tom alluded, we're living in an alternative Alice in Wonderland, Emperor's New Clothes universe. Even the mainstream media, every night, their economists go on television and say, we're fighting inflation. I mean, Economics for Dummies, Chapter 2, will show you don't raise interest rates. 2009, we had a similar situation. The Bank of England left interest rates alone at 0.5% for 3 years till they fell. We would have been out of this cost of living crisis long ago, but for Andrew Bailey. That's what I maintain. He should be shackled and put in stocks in the Royal Exchange in front of the Bank of England.
Oh, that might be a step too far, Roger.
Might be a step too far. Might be a step too far.
We'll not promote that.
No, absolutely.
Good to get your views.
But Nigel Farage, I think, could possibly. They are so bad. They are so desperate. Everything Tom Slater just said. They have no hope. If they have any sense at all, they will turn it over to Nigel, whose manifesto. And oh, by the way, he and Tyson, I know them all personally, but they are still going to be politicians, and so I can't vouch for how they'll actually act once they're in office. But their ideas make a heck of a lot of sense compared to the other manifestos, and the Tories would do well, instead of disappearing to Mars, to combine with them and let Nigel and Richard and Ben Habib and David Bull run things. I know it's crazy. You know, call me a lunatic, but that's my prediction. 14 days.
We shall see. Roger, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, 21 minutes past 7, let's take a look at some other stories coming to the newsroom this morning.
And some breaking news on those Just Stop Oil antics this morning. 2 activists, and you can see have provided footage as well, very kind of them, have broken into a private airfield in Stansted. They vandalised a private jet, demanding an end to fossil fuels by 2030. It's the same airfield where Taylor Swift's private jet is thought to be parked, and comes just after another 2 activists yesterday targeted Stonehenge.
The mother of a British teenager who's gone missing in Tenerife says he may have been kidnapped after receiving a Snapchat saying, "Kiss goodbye to your son." Jay Slater from Lancashire was last heard from on Monday morning. The 19-year-old called a friend to say he was lost, with no water and his phone was on 1% battery. His last location shown was in a mountainous region on the island, popular with hikers.
The SNP is promising another referendum on Scottish independence and has unveiled plans to rejoin the EU. Launching their manifesto, their leader John Swinney says he wants to see an end as well to the 2-child benefit cap.
And the Liberal Democrats have pledged to invest £300 million to fix roads across the country, with the goal to fill in 1.2 million potholes.
At 7:23, let's see what the weather's going to do for you today with Annie.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Another dry and fine day for many of us. Plenty of warm sunshine, but it is a little bit cloudier in the north and west. Further wet weather is going to arrive here later. For the time being, just a risk of some drizzly rain for the likes of Northern Ireland, far southwest of Scotland, perhaps moving into the far north of Scotland later on today. Elsewhere though, dry and bright, plenty of sunshine. Maybe a little bit hazy for some of us. We've still got the remnants of a weather front for some central areas of of the UK, but it's going to be feeling warm in that June sunshine. Temperatures approaching the mid-20s for southeastern areas and even across central areas of England as well. So high UV levels, and it is in fact the summer solstice today, so the sun won't be setting till very late. We've got 19 hours of sunlight or daylight across Lerwick today, and somewhere between 19 and 16 hours across the UK. So plenty of sunshine, or time to enjoy the sunshine through today, and it will be a fairly bright end to the day later on today. It's potentially still a little bit more cloud around across Wales and up towards the Humber as well. A risk of some rain, but I think for most of us it's going to be very much a dry day. However, through this evening, as I said, it will turn a bit wetter across the far north or west of Scotland and into Northern Ireland. That's a weather front approaching from the northwest. It's not going to make great progress inland, but it will push into parts of central Scotland later on in the night, bringing cloudier skies up for many western areas. So a little bit milder in the west, still fairly fresh though to start the day across eastern areas, but another bright start. There could be some mist and fog around very first thing, but the sunrise is rising around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, so it should clear quite quickly or by the time you are up and about. So through the rest of Friday, a little bit more in the way of cloud compared to Thursday, but still fairly warm in the sunshine, particularly across the south and east, with potentially some wet weather arriving later on in the west. See you later. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now it's time for our giveaway and your chance to win over £16,000 worth of prizes. That's 15k in cash, and then a whole host of summer treats as well.
Yeah, but of course, if you want it, you've got to be in it to win it, so here are the details.
Don't miss out on your chance to win our Summer Spectacular. And have we got a prize for you? First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Yes, good luck indeed. Now, still to come.
Oh, no.
Oh, do you want to...
No, not still to come. There's because...
Oh, yeah.
Because...
Breaking
just
news.
read...
It
is breaking news. If you're single out there...
Yeah.
Apparently there's a new study out today. Well, being sturdy is not a bad thing. If you've got sturdy legs, you could be doing all right. Because people aren't waiting for Mr. or Mrs. Right now.
Oh, they're not?
Apparently, no. If you're dating, you're quite happy to just settle for someone being absolutely average. You don't want anyone better than a 6 out of 10. No one has the... There isn't a perfect catch.
Well, that's not very romantic.
Don't want a sense of humour.
Oh, no, you need a sense of humour.
Don't just being dead boring and ordinary.
Why would you want boring? Does it say why?
Bog standard bows and mediocre misses.
Oh.
According to this poll. So if you're looking for love this morning, set your
average, apparently.
Set your standards much, much lower, and apparently you could find someone.
I don't think that's a great message.
No, I think it's
to spread this morning.
Thoroughly depressing.
It is.
There you
anyway,
go.
let us know what you think about that one. gbnews.com/you'll say. Still to come, should there be an upper age limit to politicians? We're going to be debating that. That's next.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Now, as Labour ride high in the polls, especially the new polls out this morning, they could see Sir Keir Starmer elected Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Here's a question for you. At 62, is he too old?
Yes, he turned 62 in September. Of the 16 post-war leaders, only 3 were older when they assumed office.
Yeah, but one of those was Churchill.
Yeah.
So, there you go. So, can you be too old for all of this sort of malarkey? Let's talk to the writer Emma Webb and political commentator Anna McGovern. Good to see you both this morning. Anna, what do you think? Is Keir Starmer going to be too old at 62, or do we need a limit of 70, 75, something like that for politicians?
No, so according to data, the longest serving MP is actually for 63 years. I don't think there should be an upper age limit necessarily for how one should stand as an MP. I think if you're competent and you can do the job and your constituents want you, I think that's absolutely fine. I do believe, however, that the lower age limit should absolutely remain. I know there has been some talk as well about potentially lowering the age of when one can stand as an MP, and I think that's probably a bit more of a ridiculous notion. I was a youth MP back when I was 17 in the UK Youth Parliament, and I thought that was a fantastic mechanism for actually getting young people who want to make a difference in their local communities have the opportunity to do so. They're elected by their peers and they're there to actually represent youth interests. So I think schemes like that are absolutely fantastic for getting young people involved as well.
Emma, what do you think?
No disagreement with Anna, actually. I think that, the issue with someone like Joe Biden, who is usually used as the example of the problems and the challenges that you face if you have a an elderly leader, shall we say, is not that he's old, it's that he's senile. And I think that if somebody is compos mentis, your biological age doesn't matter a great deal. And actually, there's a great benefit to having older people in positions of leadership and authority, because at least ideally, they should have more wisdom than younger people and more experience. So my objection to Keir Starmer wouldn't be his age. I actually don't think either that your early 60s is old. People live a lot longer now, and he's obviously on the youthful side of your early 60s. So no, I actually agree with Anna. I think that there's a better argument to be made that younger people, particularly younger people who are candidates to be MPs, should go and gain some experience in the world before going into professional politics, and that there's a stronger argument for a lower age, not a lower age limit, but a stronger argument for having MPs, say, be over the age of 30, and maybe leaders should be over the age of 40.
Well, look at you two. Completely in absolute and utter agreement on everything. There you go. That's a debate for you. Emma Webb, Anna McGovern, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. Loads of you getting in touch today. Groucho, I don't think that's your real name, says if anything should be a minimum age, it should be 30. Anthony Mills says there should be a lower age limit, not an upper one.
Yes. Oh, well.
And Lee Drake says Keir Starmer isn't too old, but Biden potentially is. He is nearly 80. In fact, I think he's 81.
I mean, 62 isn't too old.
No.
I mean, it's not even retirement age, is it?
No, not now. No, it's not.
So there you go. Right, still to come for you. Scotland hang on in there, and England look to seal a spot in the last 16. All the latest from the Euros with Aidan McGee in a minute.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding in Northamptonshire. Weedon Road in Northampton is closed each way between the Sixfields roundabout and Upton Valley Way North for an investigation. In Oxfordshire, the A424 is closed each way between Tainton and Milton under Wychwood after an accident causing delays. In Essex, the A127 is partly blocked westbound between the Halfway House roundabout at West Horndon and the M25, taking roughly 10 minutes in delays towards there. In London, on the A13, the inside lane is closed westbound where a lorry's broken down just after the Lodge Avenue flyover at Barking. There are long delays towards there with queues from the Ferry Lane interchange at Rainham. On the M26 in Kent, there are westbound queues approaching the M25 because of roadworks. And in Surrey, the A3 is partly blocked northbound by an accident at Guildford, causing delays. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frothy in here, isn't it? You'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice.
Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 7:38. Yes, it is. And it's time for the sport now with Aidan.
Good
Morning,
to see you
Aidan.
both. I want to start with England, if that's all right. This time.
Let's. It's big games today.
Yes. Well, 5 o'clock kick-off this evening, as we've established in some of the coverage this morning. I think Ellie had a stat for us last hour, didn't she? Something like
21%.
21% of people will skive off work.
Skiving off work this afternoon.
Well, look, it is a little bit awkward for some people, but at least it's not at 2 o'clock. But when we look ahead to the match itself, I mean, look, England could do with a performance in this match, I would suggest. They were great in the first half an hour against Serbia, as you said, you observed that yourself, didn't you?
I was watching very, very closely.
And then he wasn't happy after that, were you?
No. Well, I thought
they did tail off a little bit.
They did. Well, they totally tailed off.
They did, but then Serbia are not a bad side. They're quite a good unit. But look, a win is a win. You start the tournament well. It makes the rest of the group stage a lot easier for England. There's a huge incentive tonight because if they win, they will almost certainly top the group, and it gives them the luxury of being able to rest players in the third game if that's what they decide to do. And you don't get much rest in this tournament because it's a match every 3 or 4 days. In terms of personnel this evening, there's lots of clamour to maybe move out Phil Foden because he's not been performing for England of late. In fact, I would argue that he didn't play well for City in the FA Cup final. Maybe he's a little bit lacking in minutes, but then I would also say that in the FA Cup in the match on Saturday, Gareth Southgate made the point in his press conference yesterday that he's covered more ground or more distance than any other player in the squad or in the team for the game against Serbia. And there's also been a call to maybe move out Trent Alexander-Arnold, put in Kobbie Mainoo as well, the young Man United player who's really comes to prominence in the second half of the season. That would be a hell of a thing for him. It's a great thing that he's in the squad, but at his age, it'd be a hell of a thing for him to be starting for England. So there's lots of ponderables around, but I think ultimately Gareth Southgate is a very conservative coach, as most international managers are, because they don't get much time with their players, not much opportunity to experiment, and I think they'll go unchanged tonight. I think they'll still have more than enough to beat Denmark. Denmark are not the side they were 3 years ago. Christian Eriksen, Kasper Schmeichel, Simon Kjær. Simon Kjær's not available anyway because he's injured, but they're all 3 years older, and they don't quite have the personnel to trouble England this evening. So I predict England will win. I don't think it'll be comfortable necessarily, but I think they'll get through.
OK. Well, we shall see. Mind you, Scotland, talk about a reversal of fortunes.
Yeah, I mean, what a difference a few days makes. I mean, we were poring over their carcass, weren't we, effectively, because we just thought that a 5-1 defeat against Germany would probably see them out of the tournament. We couldn't see any hope in the next couple of games, but they play a very, very competent Switzerland side yesterday who won their first game 3-1. And they took the lead, and they got a draw. Yes, there were still mistakes around the pitch. There were still misplaced passes. There were things they can do better. There was a horrible mistake by Andrew Ralston for the Switzerland equaliser. But overall, they fought. They were aggressive. Most of the basics were done very well. And a point leaves them on the verge of history because, as I say, we were predicting doom for them just a few days ago. But they've never, in all their history, they've never come out of a group stage at an international tournament. So they've got an opportunity to do that by beating a Hungary side who have lost their first 2 matches, and that'll be on Sunday. And so I would argue that's their biggest game in a generation. I can't think of a bigger game outside of, certainly not, I think this is bigger than the playoffs because we're at the tournament itself. But the Tartan Army will be feeling much, much better about themselves this morning. They've given themselves a fighting chance, and I think they would have accepted that going into the last group game if you'd offered them that a week and a half ago.
OK. Aidan, thank you very much.
Right. Still to come for you this morning, we're going to take you through the papers with Charlie Rowley and Emma Burnell.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Helen Worth, who of course plays Gail Platt in Coronation Street, is going to leave the soap after an epic 50 years. I'm joined now by another Corrie legend, Charlie Lawson, whose character, of course, Jim McDonald, lived across the cobbles from Gail Platt for many years. Welcome to the show, Charlie. I can see you looking at those images there, and it has to be said, fantastic acting. In 50 years, many of us just grew up with these characters and basically think they're part of our family. Can you shed light on some of your happy memories of the talent of Helen Worth?
We saw each other every day. She was a consummate professional and still is. This initially surprised me, but then I thought about it, and I'm frankly not surprised. Having spoken to certain senior members of the cast over the last period of time, you know, when Helen joined, or even when I joined, there was a cast of 25. I would put another 75 on that now, perhaps. It's a different animal now, totally, you know, 4, 5, 6 episodes a week. When Helen started, it would have been 2. She lives in London. She's not getting any younger. And she's done 50 years, for God's sake. Nobody can ask any more of that. And listen, Helen, look at that wee smile. God bless you, darling. I hope you have a great retirement. The trouble with actors is that we very, very rarely hang our boots up unless the bank balance is full, which it very seldom is. But also, we live for attention. And when you're in the most famous program on the planet, that attention 9 times out of 10 is an extremely good experience.
The People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
7:45. Let's have a look through the papers then with former special advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, and the journalist and playwright Emma Burnell. Morning to you both, Emma.
Morning.
Let's have a look at the Mail, should we? And this police officer who was working in PM's close protection team, arrested over alleged bets over the election.
Yeah, so it came out about a week ago, I think, that Rishi Sunak's, one of his closest advisors, had put a bet on the date of the election just a few days before. And as part of the investigation into that from the Gambling Commission, it now seems that these close protection officers have been using that close protection relationship to make a little money on the side.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, absolutely. Look, we need to be able to trust the people who are in these positions to do them with no fear or favour. And I just think making side bets, if that is what has been happening, it's just not a great look for the Met or for professionalism.
No, probably not. Probably not.
But what could the Tories do to control that? Really, you can't, can you?
Well, no, you can't. I think it's frustrating on the one hand because, as Emma says, this is on the back of last week where an MP was effectively, potentially, if it's proven, cashing in on insider information that only that MP might know. So, of course, public outcry, rightly so. But what irritates me now a little bit is that, OK, yes, police officer, again, probably privileged potentially to information that he's acted upon, or she's acted upon. But I don't think it's as outrageous as an MP doing it, I have to say, because it's not someone that's working in frontline politics.
To be totally controversial, but as I always like to be with you, absolutely honest. If I was in a position where someone I knew said, "Oh, you know what's going to happen next week?" I'd have put a bet on.
Well, you would, and that's why I think. Look, I'm not as outraged as I think as maybe some people are about this police officer. I totally get it if it's an MP and it's a politician. But what's irritating about the story is that it is it broke news yesterday afternoon. it is just adding to the Tory party, its campaign at the minute, which is obviously lacklustre. It is just another thing associated in a negative headline with the Prime Minister, with the Conservatives during an election campaign. It is totally unhelpful. So that's why I'm irritated by it. But I think you're right. Most people would chance their arm if they were in a position.
There are levels and levels, and I think there are most jobs. I don't think it would matter that much if, as you say. So I know someone in film catering who's had a flutter on the next James Bond because he's seen a body double.
Well,
but I just think, in terms
tell
of...
me later on.
But in terms of the police, I think the police do need to go above and beyond. And if this is a breaking of the law, we shouldn't have police officers doing that.
No, well, no. I mean, that yes, absolutely. Charlie, in the Mail, Rishi Sunak hailing as great news inflation finally getting back to the target of 2%. However, as welcome as that is, people are then going to say, great, interest rates are going to come down today. It doesn't look like they are.
Well, you had former advisor to the Bank of England on your programme earlier on this morning who we were gripped by, and I think, he is absolutely right. What he said, interest rates should come down. They've been up far too high for far too long. Obviously steady as she goes, but now is the time, I think, that you can have a little bit of room for manoeuvre. And that should be the story that the Conservative campaign should be pumping out. But it's obviously been distracted by the story that we were just talking about with the police officer, obviously overshadowed completely by front pages of the Telegraph and the Times when it's talking about the polling, where it could be a total Tory wipeout and the Prime Minister losing his seat. The good bit of news that the Tory party should be pumping out is that inflation, after so long, has now come down. It is all about the cost of living at this election. It should be about taxes. It should be about spending. It should be about the economy stupid. And it's just a shame that, again, this a bit of success for the Tory party, a well-managed economy, after difficult times, having to raise taxes to fund COVID, things that were protecting people's jobs, their lives and their livelihoods, all things that the Tories have done, and they should be trying to get a bit of credit for. We're trying to get to the country to listen to why they're making those tough decisions, and things are now back on track, is lost in other negative news stories.
The problem with this is, it is a good news story. Rishi Sunak, I'm not sure how much he had to do with it. There are various international factors. They've been coming down all over the world. The problem is that when people hear inflation's coming down, you more often than not think, does that mean prices are coming down? And it doesn't mean that. It means prices are going up slower. And I think too much of the problem the Tories have is not the rate of inflation, but it's the cost of butter.
Yeah.
Emma, let's have a look at the Daily Mirror, shall we? And this is recurring back pain affects 8 out of 10 people, and it's the leading cause of workplace absence.
Yeah, back pain can be absolutely crippling, and I know this in a very, very personal capacity. I have lost some weight, and when my weight fluctuates, when it goes up, one of the places I feel it most is in my back. And one of the things that they've said is that people should walk more, and I cannot recommend this highly enough. Walking a lot really helps both your back and your mental health as well.
Is that to do with core strength and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's just very, very good. Gentle exercise that pretty much anyone can do. It's free to go for a walk, so it's not like joining an expensive gym that you pay your membership, you do it really religiously for a month and then you never go back.
Yeah.
And walking is very easy to build into your day. If you just say, for example, go to one further tube stop or one further bus stop, you can add a little bit of walking into your routine rather than having to think, oh my God, I need to go for my hour's walk.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. But you can't afford to you can't afford to be off work, especially at the minute.
And but back pain can be so distracting and crippling. When I had sciatica, I've never experienced pain like it. It was just the most crippling agony. I could not move for days. So these things, if you can ward that off as much as possible, I highly recommend it.
Yeah. Working from home, Charlie, according to the Times, makes you happier.
Well, yes, and...
Jacob Rees-Mogg will be livid.
Well, yes, he'll be coming up to your front door, slipping a note through the little letterbox there to say, get back to work. Although, actually, we wouldn't have that issue because we love to turn up here every day.
We're always here.
It's a
well, sometimes I do it from home.
Yes. But
it's no surprise that the study has found that the majority of people enjoy working from home, prefer to work from home, but again, headline grabbing, they're not as productive.
No, that's not true. They are equally productive, but they're not more productive.
They're not as productive, and it's
no, but that's not what the study found.
It goes on to talk about.
But if the study didn't find it, it's not common sense.
It is what should be happening in this country is that people should look. People can work from home, and you can have a more flexible lifestyle, and that can be something that I think if we were having an open conversation about post-COVID. Well, I think in a post-COVID society, I wouldn't expect still today, actually, after COVID, people still being crammed into the trains at the 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. You can stagger things a bit more. You can work a bit later, start a bit later. There should be more flexibility in the system just to help with living in general and making people's lives better after a terrible pandemic. But I think it is, always better to be in the office because you can actually get more things done and you don't have the day-to-day distractions of making a cup of tea or watching Loose Women or anything. Or putting.
What kind of office do you work in when you're not allowed a cup of tea?
But
we're out of time. You too, Emma, Charlie. Thank you very much. Look at the weather now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Another dry and fine day for many of us. Plenty of warm sunshine, but it is a little bit cloudier in the north and west. Further wet weather is going to arrive here later. For the time being, just a risk of some drizzly rain for the likes of Northern Ireland, far southwest of Scotland, perhaps moving into the far north of Scotland later on today. Elsewhere though, dry and bright, plenty of sunshine. Maybe a little bit hazy for some of us. We've still got the remnants of a weather front for some central areas of the UK, but it's going to be feeling warm in that June sunshine. Temperatures approaching the mid-20s for southeastern areas and even across central areas of England as well. So high UV levels, and it is in fact the summer solstice today, so the sun won't be setting till very late. We've got 19 hours of sunlight or daylight across Lerwick today, and somewhere between 19 and 16 hours across the UK. So plenty of sunshine or time to enjoy the sunshine through today, and it will be a fairly bright end to the day later on today. Potentially still a little bit more cloud around across Wales and up towards the Humber as well. A risk of some rain, but I think for most of us it's going to be very much a dry day. However, through this evening, as I said, it will turn a bit wetter across the far north or west of Scotland and into Northern Ireland. That's a weather front approaching from the northwest. It's not going to make great progress inland, but it will push into parts of central Scotland later on in the night, bringing cloudier skies for many western areas. So a little bit milder in the west, still fairly fresh though to start the day across eastern areas, but another bright start. There could be some mist and fog around very first thing, but the sunrise is rising around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, so it should clear quite quickly or by the time you are up and about. So through the rest of Friday, a little bit more in the way of cloud compared to Thursday, but still fairly warm in the sunshine, particularly across the south and east, with potentially some wet weather arriving later on in the west. See you later. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Edinburgh tram services have been stopped westbound from Princes Street to Edinburgh Airport after a bus broke down on the line. In Lincolnshire, it's day 2 of the Lincolnshire Show. Parts of the A15 closed to all but show traffic. In Northamptonshire, Wheaton Road in Northampton is closed each way between the Sixfields roundabout and Upton Valley Way North for an investigation. In Oxfordshire, the A424 is closed each way between Tainton and Milton under Wychwood after an accident. In London, on the A13, the inside lane's closed westbound where a lorry's broken down just after the Lodge Avenue flyover embarking with queues from Ferry Lane, Rainham. Also in London, the Blackwall Tunnel's closed northbound where a car's broken down with queues from the A2 at the Sun in the Sands. And there are delays of just over half an hour with some cancelled trains westbound from Rochester to Swanley thanks to a faulty train earlier on at Follingham Road. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
there's still time to win our Summer Spectacular with an incredible trio of treats, and you could win them. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock, Thursday, the 20th of June. Today, Cabinet Minister Michael Gove says the Tories still have time to defy the polls after they suggest the party will suffer its worst defeat in 100 years. We're going to talk to him at 8:45.
They're up against more than politicians in Labour now, though. Sir Keir Starmer recruits the help of former England footballer Gary Neville as he sells his vision for the country.
The search intensifies for the missing teen in Tenerife as his mum reveals a horrifying Snapchat she got when he disappeared.
Just Stop Oil have been at it again this morning. Two activists have broken into a private airfield at Stansted Airport to vandalise a private jet. That comes as the group faced widespread criticism for defacing Stonehenge yesterday.
Racing's glitziest festival continues. Royal Ascot and our royal correspondent, of course, Cameron Walker, is there to bring us all the very latest from Ladies' Day.
Good morning. Scotland are off the mark at the Euros. We'll reflect on their spirited draw with Switzerland in Cologne after a disastrous opening night last week against Germany. We'll look ahead also to England's clash with Denmark, and in tennis, could Andy Murray be denied a swan song at Wimbledon? More later.
Good morning. It'll be a fine and dry day for many of us with temperatures approaching the mid-20s. Find out all the details with me a little later on.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Right, should we talk politics then this morning? Well, I mean, it's all you're messaging about, frankly, on gbnews.com/yoursay. It's all about the politics. So, looking at the latest polls, gotta say it is going from bad to worse for the Prime Minister as a new string of polls is predicting a Tory wipeout.
Yes, Rishi Sunak could become the first Prime Minister in history to lose his seat at an election, with a Savanta poll for The Telegraph finding that Conservatives could be reduced to just 53 seats.
Same poll says Labour would win 516. That gives them a majority of 382. And that would put them in the history books.
Well, let's get the thoughts of our political editor, Christopher Hope, who joins us now. Very good morning to you, Christopher. And you will be on the battle bus with the Tories a little bit later on, won't you? You can only imagine the mood on that bus with these polls predicting a Tory wipeout.
Yeah, morning, Steve. Morning, Ellie. Yeah, this kind of headline in the Daily Telegraph is not normal. This is a Tory-supporting newspaper with a survey which I think will be sending night terrors through this Tory party. This party is being disemboweled by the electorate, according to this polling. The numbers are extraordinary. Labour to get 516 MPs, the Tories down to 53, Lib Dems 50, SNP down to 8. In this poll, Reform gets 0 because I think Savanta, who did the poll, have changed the way they calculate the minor parties and brought Reform now as its own question in the polling. So that may change. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, loses his seat in Richmond in Yorkshire, which is extraordinary. That hasn't happened ever in political history. The nearest we got to that was Arthur Balfour back in 1906, when he was Prime Minister and became opposition leader and then lost his seat. So it's never happened before, Ellie and Stephen. This to me explains why when I'm out and about with these leaders, and I'm with Michael Gove on the battle bus later, they are going to very safe seats, on average around 15,000 majorities they're visiting Rishi Sunak. He's doing that because they are in a defensive crouch. And you must remember, by the way, that this party voluntarily called this election. They thought they could get ahead of where the polls might be and surprise everybody. Well, that strategy has completely backfired. If this poll is correct now, the caveat is that the only poll that matters, as the PM always tells us, is the 4th of July. But that now is just 2 weeks away. So Michael Gove is right. There is a huge challenge facing this party, according to the polls. I should say yesterday there were 3 super polls out called MRP polls. This Savanta Telegraph was one from YouGov, one from More in Common, and they all agreed on one thing: a Labour landslide.
Why is it, Christopher, that with very little sort of active enthusiasm for the Labour Party, we know Keir Starmer is not sort of pulling people on board with his charisma or these sort of great policies that are out there. I mean, that isn't what's happening here. So, is this all down to A, massive dissatisfaction with the government, and B, that split with Reform? I mean, is that what's driving this?
I think both of your points are right, Stephen. If you add Reform's polling broadly with the Tory one, you get to 2 or 3 points behind Labour. So if you did take Reform out of the picture, that would no question help the Conservative Party. But equally, I think there's just a feeling of change in the country. Sometimes the herd moves, to quote Boris Johnson when he left, he was forced out by his own MPs back in 2022. So I think a need for change, a feeling of change. I think the Tory Party has got lots of policies, but no one's listening. I mean, the party's gone backwards in the polling. On average, over the past 15 normal polls, they're down 3 points since they launched the campaign. So no one cares what they're saying, it seems, amongst the public, according to the polls. They talk. Rishi Sunak's big thing is inflation. That's down at 2%. We will cut taxes. Labour will put them up. The problem the Tory party has got is the Tories have put up taxes too. So they might be saying trust us on tax, but over the past 5 years, they have ramped up tax to pay for the Ukraine war, the energy shock, and COVID. So it kind of undermines almost the PM's messaging.
Christopher, you just mentioned the name Boris Johnson, and we've heard in the past few minutes we now have a release date for his memoir. Boris Johnson is called Unleashed. Yeah. Tell us what we know.
That's right. He's never far away from anyone's thoughts in Westminster, even though he's not even an MP, and he's spending most of the election campaign, by all accounts, on holiday. But there we are, Boris Johnson. He's working on his book, his memoir. He's being paid a huge amount of money for it. It's out on the 10th of October. His publisher says it will, quote, shatter the mould of the modern prime ministerial memoir. Well, we hope it's on time. When I worked with him at the Telegraph, not all of his columns arrived on time. Let's hope he hits that deadline, the 10th of October. He hasn't hit a deadline previously for a book about Shakespeare. That's also expected shortly. For me, the timing is interesting. The 10th of October is after the end of the Tory party conference. Now, that party conference could well see this party elect a new leader, if these polls are correct. And so any kind of intervention from Boris Johnson, again, not an MP, but what he says about politics is so important. It might be that the book is out after that happens.
Yeah. OK, Christopher, for now, thanks very much indeed.
Now, environmental protesters Just Stop Oil have been at it again this morning, this time breaking into an airfield at Stansted Airport to target private jets. It's thought that Taylor Swift's plane was parked at that very airport.
Well, it comes after the group has been heavily criticised for spraying Stonehenge with orange paint or orange corn flour or whatever it is. It's provoked universal condemnation. Wiltshire Police confirmed that 2 people have been arrested. The English Heritage Chief Executive, Dr Nick Merriman, said there appears to be no visible damage after the paint was cleaned.
Well, let's speak now to our South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody. Very good morning to you, Jeff. And we can see Stonehenge behind you there. It is an iconic site to so many, isn't it? And that is one of the reasons why there's been absolute outrage over what we saw happen there yesterday.
Yes, absolutely. This is the closest we can actually get to Stonehenge this morning. As you say, you can see it over my shoulder here. This is the A303. It's busy at any time of the day, but this is where people sort of slow down a little bit so they can have a look at Stonehenge. It was at around midday yesterday that 2 protesters sprayed this orange powder paint over the stones. They were wrestled to the ground, or at least one of them was, by members of the public, but they had, by that point, they had sprayed the stones. Well, Wiltshire Police say they made 2 arrests. Neve Lynch, who's a 21-year-old student from Oxford, and Rajan Naidu, who's a 73-year-old from Birmingham. Well, as you say, outright condemnation for this. Rishi Sunak led the condemnation yesterday by describing it as a disgraceful act of vandalism. And the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, said the damage was outrageous and described Just Stop Oil as pathetic. Well, Just Stop Oil has said, look, there isn't any lasting damage. It's only powder paint. First spot of rain and it'll wash off. English Heritage weren't quite so sure about that. They called in several experts yesterday, but it does look as though there's been no serious damage to the stones as things stand. But the question, of course, is why have they done this? Now, Just Stop Oil originally said that their motivation was to prevent all new oil and gas licences from being issued. Well, the Labour leader says he won't. If he comes to power, he won't issue any of these new licences. So, seeing as the polls look very much likely that Sir Keir Starmer will be in number 10, Just Stop Oil are moving the goalpost a little, because they're now saying, look, yes, we recognise the fact that an incoming Labour government won't issue any more of these licences, but we now want more. We now want all governments to sign up to a treaty banning all use of fossil fuels, phasing all use completely by 2030. Just 6 years' time. That's their new demand. They say that they're going to keep going with these campaigns until they get their demands. But of course, the timing of this is very interesting. It's the longest day of the year. It's the summer solstice tonight. From around 7 o'clock this evening, we're expecting around 5,000 people to descend on Stonehenge. They come here twice a year for the winter solstice and for the summer solstice, and they stay overnight, and then they watch the sun coming up the next morning. So we're expecting the site to be open later on today for those 1,000 people to come and enjoy the summer solstice.
Yeah, well, let's hope none of this actually stops them from doing that. Jeff, for now, thanks very much indeed.
United front on this.
Well, yeah, good.
Both condemning it.
You can't understand what they're trying to achieve with this, apart from making themselves even less popular.
I mean, even staunch environmentalists like Emma was describing herself as there, she was saying, I can't agree with what I'm seeing them do here.
No.
It's very hard to get people on board with this.
But you might be even more furious at the fact they appear to have painted what could be Taylor Swift's plane orange this morning.
I know, yeah.
I mean, Taylor will be livid.
I mean, she does rack up a lot of air miles, to be fair, but she's never claimed to be an eco-warrior or... she's not hypocritical. She wouldn't tell other people not to get on private jets. But no, I'm sure.
Have you ever been on a private jet?
No, I'd like to be on a private jet. Sorry, Just Stop Oil.
Okay.
Have you ever been on a private jet?
No,
well, it looks very good.
I'd love to do it.
Yeah.
I'd love to do it.
Maybe that could be my next birthday present from you.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah. What would that cost?
Have a little think about it.
What would it cost?
This is what I have to do, you see. I have to plant the seed.
You can plant the seed all you like.
And then you might think about it.
Unless I win the lottery, you won't be getting a private jet.
All right, well, Have a little think. You've got a while.
I'll tell you what I would do. I'd book you a glider.
Oh, that doesn't sound as fun.
I was looking at gliders. We saw a lot of gliders yesterday.
Is that the one where you're in like this?
Well, yeah, but, you know, you get towed up by a plane and then
Yeah, I don't like the
released.
sound of that one so much. You can do that, maybe. I
I mean,
can
it's
watch.
in effect a private jet. Well, private plane.
It's not quite the same. I'd like a glass of champagne.
Yeah, well, if you took your own, you might manage it.
Yeah, well. Anyway, keep your views coming in. I don't know how we got from just up oil to champagne on a private jet. But anyway, gbnews.com/your say.
Right, now the mum of a British teenager who's gone missing in Tenerife says he may have been kidnapped. Now, that's after she had a message on Snapchat apparently saying, "Kiss goodbye to your son."
Yes, Jay Slater from Lancashire was last heard from on Monday morning. The 19-year-old called a friend to say he was lost with no water and his phone was on 1% battery.
Well, let's talk to the editor of the Canarian Weekly, Chris Elkington, who joins us now. Chris, good to see you this morning. What is going on in terms of the search?
Good morning. It stopped last night at some because they can't search it in the dark.
OK, apologies, Chris, we are going to have to leave it there. That line's breaking up from Tenerife, sadly. You cannot imagine what the family is going through. What I don't understand with this Snapchat message is why someone would say that when he's already messaged to say, I'm lost, I don't know where I am, I've no water, I've no battery. Is it actually someone who said we've kidnapped your son, or is it someone just being vindictive and nasty and trying to upset Jay's mother?
Yeah, because unfortunately that does happen, doesn't it, in instances like this?
It does.
But he has been missing since Monday. His mum has said that Jay Slater, is not a stupid boy and he would have flagged down a car or spoken to passers-by if he could have done. So she is concerned that this is actually a story of kidnap.
Well, I don't know, is it... It's hard to know. If that was the case, at least you know he was actually alive and well somewhere. It's just horrific. It's just utterly horrific.
Yeah, I was reading about him this morning. He's 19 years old, an apprentice, and he's been saving up for months for this holiday to Tenerife with his friends. His first holiday abroad with his friends. Apparently he was so excited. That's what his mum was saying. And now there is, of course, there's mountain rescuers and the local civil guard. They are out searching for him. But it is a mountainous part of the island, I believe, that he was last located in. So it is a bit of a concern that he may have collapsed somewhere in that wooded area.
Well, let's just hope and pray that he turns up safe and well and soon. It'd be something great to hang on to if that happens today. Right, in the meantime, let's go check on the weather for you here. Here's Annie.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Another dry and fine day for many of us. Plenty of warm sunshine, but it is a little bit cloudier in the north and west. Further wet weather is going to arrive here later. For the time being, just a risk of some drizzly rain for the likes of Northern Ireland, far southwest of Scotland, perhaps moving into the far north of Scotland later on today. Elsewhere, though, dry and bright, plenty of sunshine. Maybe a little bit hazy for some of us. We've still got the remnants of a weather front for some central areas of the UK, but it's going to be feeling warm in that June sunshine. Temperatures approaching the mid-20s for southeastern areas and even across central areas of England as well. So high UV levels, and it is in fact the summer solstice today, so the sun won't be setting till very late. We've got 19 hours of sunlight or daylight across Lerwick today, and somewhere between 19 and 16 hours across the UK. So plenty of sunshine, or time to enjoy the sunshine through today, and it will be a fairly bright end to the day later on today. It's potentially still a little bit more cloud around across Wales and up towards the Humber as well. A risk of some rain, but I think for most of us it's going to be very much a dry day. However, through this evening, as I said, it will turn a bit wetter across the far north or west of Scotland and into Northern Ireland. That's a weather front approaching from the northwest. It's not going to make great progress inland, but it will push into parts of central Scotland later on in the night, bringing cloudier skies for many western areas. So a little bit milder powder in the west, still fairly fresh though to start the day across eastern areas, but another bright start. There could be some mist and fog around very first thing, but the sunrise is rising around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, so it should clear quite quickly or by the time you are up and about. So through the rest of Friday, a little bit more in the way of cloud compared to Thursday, but still fairly warm in the sunshine, particularly across the south and east, with potentially some wet weather arriving later on in the west. See you later. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, it's time now for our giveaway and your chance to win more than £16,000 worth of prizes.
Yes, that's 15k in cash and a whole host of summer treats too. So it could be yours, but of course you've got to be in it to win it. Here's all the details that you need.
Don't miss out on your chance to win our Summer Spectacular. And have we got a prize for you? First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Yes, good luck indeed. Do stay with us. Still to come, Ada McGee will be here with all of your sport. We're also going to cross over to Royal Ascot because Cameron Walker is there in his lovely morning suit, I think you'd call it, and your top hat. Of course, he's got a hat on. He loves it. So we're going to be talking to him shortly.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Theatres and drama schools are being offered plus-size inclusivity training. Come on, seriously, is this really a thing? In order to tackle fat phobia, to apparently make the theatre more inclusive for bigger bodies, a lady called Ruth Ann Phillips, who is a plus-size theatre director, she's behind the drive. Now, apparently, her own research, so it's not exactly independent, showed that 9 out of 10 respondents should have training on size inclusion. Ruth is also the co-founder of Inclusion Collective, which is an organisation that provides training in creative well-being, body positivity and inclusive movement. Her website contains resources on fat activism, advocacy for the rights and dignity of fat people, combating discrimination and the body-conscious scale. This is actually about health. Ruth is conflating the two. Professor Carol Sikora, a consultant oncologist, said normalising obesity has become fashionable in advertising and the media simply to sell stuff, but it's got nothing to do with celebrating diversity. Nobody needs to be fat. It's like encouraging risky behaviours such as smoking, driving after a booze up, or lying like a lobster on the beach in the sun. A balanced diet and lots of exercise are the cornerstones of a healthy lifestyle. He went on to say, how can anybody possibly justify these projects? Plus-size inclusivity training, please bring back common sense. Well, exactly. I'm for equal opportunity and for giving people credit based on merit and what they bring to the table, even if it is food. Only joking. That's where the way to my heart is through my gut. I'm looking for a man that can cook. But in truth, being obese can be dangerous. And whilst I absolutely agree you should love what God gave you, obesity is the biggest killer and costs the health service a fortune. People come in all shapes and sizes, and it's a wonderful thing. But to conflate body positivity with obesity is very dangerous.
The People's Channel.
This is GB News and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but actually it's about you.
And we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear
all sides
as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christys. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have saved Storm.
you made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christys tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Time to go through all the sport for you this morning. Aidan is here. Good morning.
Good morning to you both. How are you?
Well, yeah, all right. Though
We're looking forward to the game, aren't we?
on tenterhooks for tonight.
Tonight, 5 o'clock. Not the easiest kick-off time, just because it's going to be a rush for people getting back from work, isn't it, to watch the match. But in terms of what England have to do, they don't really have to do anything. I mean, a victory is very advantageous, clearly, because it means that it would afford them the opportunity to rest players in the final game. But I don't think he's going to change anything tonight in terms of personnel. There are issues over Phil Foden, whether he can still come in from the left. He doesn't seem to be replicating his form. We think back to John Barnes back in the 80s and 90s. He just was so good for Liverpool, but he just couldn't reproduce it for England. We're hoping we don't see another situation like that with Phil Foden, because he's gone to the tournament as the Footballer of the Year in the Premier League and in the other domestic competitions, of course. And so we need to look at the other areas of the side as well. You could say Trent Alexander-Arnold wasn't fantastic in that role alongside Declan Rice. Will he shift him out and put in Kobbie Mainoo? But we look around at all the papers this morning. The journalists have all been tipped off, I would have thought, or given a steer by the FA. I don't think he's going to make any changes at all. And I think, to be fair, Stephen, if you have a plan in your mind, if you think something's going to work, you need more than one game to execute it. They've got more than enough in the locker to beat Denmark tonight. Denmark are not the side they were 3 years ago when they took England right to the brink in the semi-final of the Euros at Wembley. And so I think they will advance through tonight, and that should give them a little bit of breathing space going into that final game against Slovenia.
Let's hope so.
Should we touch on Scotland? Because
Why
a
not?
lot has changed, hasn't it, in a matter of days?
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, look, Stephen and I were talking on Saturday. We were thinking, goodness me, this is an embarrassment of a side. They were that bad. They really were. And it's one thing playing against Germany, and yeah, you can get beaten against a home nation, especially on opening night, but 5-1. And they didn't seem to have any of the basics in place. They weren't aggressive enough. They weren't they weren't marking space. They weren't. I mean, some of the players, even Graham Souness, kind of said, well, you know, when things are going badly, sometimes you've got to put a few opponents on the backside just to disrupt the play. And they weren't even doing that. So they're going to the Switzerland game last night, and it's make or break for them. This is where you want your top players performing, and they've got some really good players. And so Switzerland are a very competent side, won the first game 3-1. Scotland get a draw, and suddenly the complexion changes. The mood among the Tartan Army and amongst the squad is much, much better now. They feel much better about themselves this morning. They've got to give themselves more than a fighting chance going into that final game against Hungary on Sunday. And they're on the verge of history now, because no Scottish side, and I'm talking about Scotland sides that have contained the likes of Graham Souness, Kenny Dalglish, Archie Gemmill, have never made it past the group stage in a major international tournament. They have the opportunity to do that now on Sunday. If they did that, that's immortality.
Yeah, it would be. Now, it's Ladies' Day at Ascot. I'm surprised you're not there sniffing around. To be honest.
Me. I know. Well, look, I enjoyed it. I went a couple of days. I went a couple of days ago.
Right.
I thought it was really good. I got an invite from an old work colleague of mine. We managed to make a day of it in a private box. I should have put that picture up of me in my suit, shouldn't I?
Oh, no, Aidan.
No. But we can cross to Cameron Walker now, our royal correspondent, can't we?
Yes, we can.
Morning, Cameron. You look very smart.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Ellie and Stephen. Appreciate it. Welcome to Royal Ascot, of course, Day 3, Ladies' Day, as you were saying. Welcome to the parade ring as well. I'm stood right where the royal family mingle as the carriage procession ends every afternoon. So this bit of tarmac here is where members of the royal family will process in front of thousands of spectators, as well as the horses racing this week as well. Lots of cooling buckets you can probably see to keep the horses nice and cool in this beautiful warm weather that we have here. And if I take you over here, this kind of winner's podium is where members of the royal family and others hand out the trophies to the winners of each race. So yesterday we had Prince William, for example, and Princess Eugenie hand out some of the trophies here at Royal Ascot. Prince William will not be here today because he's heading off to, as you were just discussing, to Germany to watch England play in their football match there for the Euros. But the King and Queen are also expected to give out some trophies, but they're also expected to perhaps win some of the races too. They have 5 runners this week at Royal Ascot. If you remember the amazing pictures from last year at Desert Hero, when that horse won the King George V Stakes, I think the King and Queen forgot they were being filmed in the royal box because their facial expressions were so excited. They were just so happy for Desert Hero to win. Very poignant, of course, because that horse was bred by the late Queen Elizabeth II as well. Desert Hero is running again, but not until Saturday in the Hardwicke Stakes. Today, Gilded Water, another of the King's horses, will be running in the King George V Stakes, as well as Treasure in the Ribblesdale Stakes and Crown Estate in the Britannia Stakes as well. But Water is apparently the horse to watch. The reason being is because it has the same trainer and jockey that Desert Hero had last year. But the King and Queen have a long way to go to match Queen Elizabeth II's record, because during her very long 70-year reign, she had over 20 winners at Royal Ascot. So it's a long way to go before the King gets to that level. But tens of thousands of people are expected to be here today for Ladies' Day in all their finery. I'm sure the Pims and the champagne will be flowing for those who would like it. And if you stay tuned until Britain's Newsroom, Ellie and Stephen, there may be a little surprise performance for you. So watch this space.
Oh,
as
long as you keep your hat on, Cameron, be all right.
Thank you, Cameron.
I will. We'll see you a little bit later on. Thanks very much indeed.
Sounds like a great day, doesn't it?
It does. That's the outfit you've got to get, Aidan.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I was a late call-up, so that was a little bit disappointing. No, it wasn't disappointing. I'm grateful. I didn't back any horses. I'm not a gambling man. No. But it was a wonderful, wonderful day. The food. I had couscous for the first time.
Did you?
Not bad for diabetics, really. You know, it's a long acting or long. Yeah. What do they call it? Sort of a slow release, isn't it?
Yeah.
Slow release carb, yes.
Slow release carb, exactly. So I didn't put any money on, but I had some fantastic conversations. Lots of secret GB News viewers around there as well.
You said you were holding court.
I was holding court. Yeah, I was a bit. Yeah. Oh, well, I do. I tend to do that wherever I go.
It's true. It's very true.
Yeah. Right, Aidan, get out. We'll see you later.
Does it look like a lovely day in Ascot as well? Nice and sunny.
Does.
Nice
it
to
does.
see the sun.
Right, still to come for you, Emma Burnell and Charlie Rowley will take us through the papers.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Lincolnshire, it's day 2 of the Lincolnshire Show, with parts of the A15 closed each way to all but show traffic. In Northamptonshire, Weedon Road is closed into and out of Northampton between Upton Valley Way North and the Sixfields roundabout for an investigation. On the M11 in Essex, there's a lane closed southbound after an accident between junctions 9 and 8 from the A11 to the Bishop Stortford Stansted Airport turn, causing long delays. In Oxfordshire, the A424 is closed each way between Tainton and Milton under Wychwood after an accident. In London, on the A13, the inside lane's closed westbound where a lorry's broken down just after the Lodge Avenue flyover at Barking, with queues towards there from the Ferry Lane interchange at Rainham. And in Kent on the M26, there are westbound queues approaching the M25 because of a lane closure for roadworks. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's Newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, and unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice.
Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Let's see what's in the papers then for you this morning with former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, and the journalist and playwright Emma Burnell. Morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Emma, all right, let's have a look at... Well, it's a viral story, Emma, because you're very with it.
I am. I'm down with the kids.
It's all about the Wags, the Tory Wags.
Oh, this boils my blood. It's not so much whether these Tory women are out campaigning. They look fabulous. They're having a great time out. They are impressive, often more so, I have to admit, than their husbands. But it's more there's been all this, why isn't Keir Starmer's wife out on the campaign trail? Because she's got a job.
What is Vic doing?
What is Vic doing? Her job. Yeah, there is just this expectation.
We all know she works in the NHS.
We do know that. We get told that quite a bit, yes. But yeah, there are. So this is such a ridiculous story. We expect partners, and I say partners, but let's face it, it's wives, because nobody is asking where Rachel Reeves' husband is.
No.
So, why are we expecting... what other job that you're going for are you expected to drag your partner along to the job interview? It's absolutely ridiculous, and I've had enough of it. If they want to go out and campaign because they believe in the Tory party or the Labour Party or whatever, great, more power to your elbow. But expecting them to be on the campaign trail because of who they happen to be married to is, frankly, a bit grim, if you ask me.
Charlie, your thoughts?
I think it's rather nice, actually. It's a nice photograph, and they're all having a jolly good time, and they're, as Emma said, they're incredibly hard-working women, successful in their own right, obviously making the case for the Conservative Party, and I think it's rather jolly. Why not?
What about I don't have a problem with them being out campaigning. It's the calls that you're getting alongside that for where are all the wives of Keir Starmer or what have you. That's the bit that...
Where are they?
Sorry, where is Keir Starmer's wife is a better phrase.
And do you get the calls for husbands, do you think, for the likes of Rachel Reeves or Angela Rayner?
Well...
or Penny Mordaunt.
Or Penny Mordaunt.
Well, if they want to come out, they might not want to. And if I was Angela Rayner's partner, I probably wouldn't want to come out and campaign for her either.
Well, I totally get.
If I were Angela Rayner's partner, I'd be very proud.
Well, look, I just sort of think it is a bit crazy that you are meant to pull out your other half. If they're not involved in politics, why can't they stay out of it?
Absolutely. I mean, I just think,
Tell that to Gary Neville.
But look, people are allowed to have political opinions if they want to, but you shouldn't have to be forced to be involved in a political life if you happen to be the partner of someone who's decided to go into politics.
Should we listen to... It's a fair point about Gary Neville, though. Is it right to pull celebrity into politics like that? Because you're trying to sway voters by saying, here's someone famous, here's someone you might admire for their footballing prowess or their commentary skills, whatever it is. That's not really we shouldn't be doing that, should we?
It's a nice chat walking through the Lake District. I think it's quite a good advert. It does the job. Celebrities in politics is always a double-edged sword. New Labour found that in their years. There was, first of all, there was all the Cool Britannia bit, and then after the Iraq War, they had lots and lots of people who were previously supporting them come out against them. So it can be fraught. There are fewer and fewer, I think, conservative celebrities. There were loads in the 1980s. You know, all of the light entertainment world would come out and support Thatcher, but that's been fewer and fewer in the arts, and so you do get less and less of it. I believe Holly Valance was at the Reform launch, but. Yeah, they are people with a perfect right to their own opinions, and because they're celebrities, those opinions tend to get magnified. And if you're a political party, you probably can see the advantage in using that magnification.
Well, you can. I just don't necessarily think it's right that celebrities should try and influence people. I think your job.
No, I think it's slightly overrated now. I mean, everybody knows Gary Neville's views. He's been harping on for a while, so it's no surprise. I don't think he'll shift the dial at all because he's suddenly some new sort of new catch by the Labour Party to come on board. But I think if you are someone who, through your celebrity, whatever that is in whatever field, but you've campaigned on particular issues because you've met people along the way, and if you are genuinely someone that might not be seen to be in politics, to then be able to come out and say, you know what, actually, in my tours, in my theatres, or in my whatever, I've met X amount of people, and there's a real problem here, and that's why I'm supporting a particular party or not. I think that has more sway because you're actually a genuine third-party person.
Marcus Rashford and free school meals. That was someone who'd said, this was my life experience. I'm now incredibly lucky, and I have a platform. I'm going to use it. Sharon Davis has done the same thing on the contaminated blood scandal. So sports people getting involved in causes is not unusual, and we are in the middle of an election, and I suspect pretty much everybody who's on the telly is probably being asked which way they're going to vote. But I think it's been noticeable that there's been considerably less celebrity endorsement in this election than I've seen in almost anyone previously.
Because they're probably like the rest of us and don't know who to vote for.
Well, you say the rest of us. I mean, if we look at the front page of the Daily Telegraph today, it's fairly clear that quite a few people have decided who to vote for.
Well,
Stephen.
according to this poll, yes, if the poll is to be believed.
I mean, the 3 polls that came out yesterday are to be believed.
Yeah, well, but that's...
And the polls for a year that have had Labour 20 points ahead.
But the polling expert that you had on this morning was obviously right to say that there isn't this big groundswell towards Sir Keir Starmer. People are not voting or switching to the Labour Party because of Sir Keir Starmer, and I think there's... that's obviously a lot
the counter-argument to that is how fed up must they be with the Tories?
Oh, well, incredibly.
Do you know what? It doesn't matter how hard you're pressing the pen, it's which box you put your X in. Frankly, Labour are ahead. Yes, you're probably right. It doesn't feel like the 97 levels of enthusiasm for Blair. But you know what happened to Blair? He fell off that pedestal. I think in some ways it's actually easier to just be at a sort of consistently solid level rather than the peaks and troughs that we saw with Boris and Rishi Sunak.
We should just be mediocre politicians.
Well, you should just be a normal person politician rather than trying to be a blooming rock star. Leave that to Gary Neville.
Well, let us know what you think on that one, gbnews.com/your say. I just wanted to ask you, both of you, about this new information we've got on Boris Johnson's memoir.
I know you'll be pre-ordering.
Going to be out in October.
No, I pre-ordered the Shakespeare book and it never arrived.
Yes, he hasn't hit his deadline on that one, has he?
Yeah, it's called Unleashed. What do you make of it, Charlie? Apparently it's going to be a book like no other.
Well, I'm sure it'll be a fascinating read. I'm looking forward to it. I think it might have slightly more accuracy. It might have slightly more accuracy than...
Is his face blacked out?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the picture. If you are listening on the radio, it's just Boris Johnson's hair and the rest of him kind of...
Why is he wearing a Hannibal Lecter shirt?
On the 10th of October 2024. Well, it might have a bit more accuracy than the plot by former Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries, which available in all good second-hand bookshops.
I mean, I will believe it on the 10th of October that that's the day that book actually comes out, because he's not known for hitting his deadlines, is he?
Would you like to... would you actually like to read it?
I have to be honest, I tend not to read political autobiographies. I read a great deal of political books. I read the book about Liz Truss's premiership, which I thought was really good. Very interesting. I've just read a book about the 5 sort of senior left-wing politicians, Diane Abbott, Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell, etc. I prefer books about politics written by a third party. I find autobiography just a bit too self-justificatory.
Well, they're going to be, though, aren't they?
Of course they are. And some people will absolutely want to read that. But for me, I prefer to read a more journalistic account.
Yeah, I have to say, I can't think of anything more dull than reading a political book. That's just me.
Do you think he'll be back, Charlie, Boris Johnson? Because some of the papers suggesting today that he'll be back in 2028, 2029?
Well, look, I think every Conservative should be out on the campaign trail during this election. I would welcome Boris to make an intervention. He's written a few brilliant columns in the Mail.
Are there many votes in Puglia? Isn't that where he is, in Italy somewhere?
Well, I think he's...
Are there many doorsteps he can knock on?
He's entitled to celebrate his 60th birthday, so wish him happy birthday, I'm sure, from everybody here at GB News. But I think, look, you know, I think between now and election, I'm sure he will make...
GB News spokesman.
Man of many talents. And I'm sure he will make an intervention, a couple more interventions between now and the campaign, making the case for the Conservative Party, where I think, you know, it will be welcome, actually. And it would probably be in his interests, I think, to anybody that is thinking about potentially going to reform. I don't think you're going to, you know, people who don't like Boris Johnson, right, are not going to, you know, they've given up on they're not going to vote for the Conservatives anyway. So I think you can factor that in, that he can only be a net gain for the Conservatives if Boris Johnson makes an intervention. And I would like him to do it. I'd like Theresa May to do it. I'd like... the others.
Liz Truss?
I wasn't actually thinking of Liz Truss, but
funny that.
I think David Cameron can make a very powerful intervention about the threats that we face in the world today, whether it's through Russia, whether it's from China, whether it's from North Korea, whether it's from Iran. I would like to see him make a grand statement, as I would Theresa, to talk about the social injustices, as I would, as I say, Boris, to talk about his vision of levelling up and getting Brexit done, and reminding people why they voted Conservative in all of those other elections that I've just talked about under those prime ministers, those brilliant prime ministers.
Right,
and I think that will help. I think that will help immensely with the Tory campaign.
Well, best of luck with that, Charlie.
Thank you. Right. But there is also someone else that I think could be brilliant in making an intervention.
Just very briefly.
And I think it's my former boss, Michael Gove.
Well, hopefully... Oh, what a segment.
Oh, very good. Very professional.
We're going to be speaking to Michael Gove if he turns up at our live spot in a couple of minutes. Keep your fingers crossed.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Recent polling suggests dentistry has become the hardest NHS service for patients to access, within NHS treatments still 15% lower than pre-pandemic levels. So a YouGov survey reveals that more than 70% of Brits describe seeing the dentist as difficult, compared with 64% for GPs and 42% for A&E services. One British man, get this, he even took to flying 10,000 miles for dental care, saying the extra time and money spent was far less hassle than trying to get an appointment on the NHS. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs. And a shocking 1/5 of UK adults have also admitted to trying DIY dentistry, including the old trick of tying string around a wobbly tooth and slamming it in the door so it comes out. So, should people be more careful when taking their teeth into their own hands?
That is one of the problems. Obviously, population growth makes it much more difficult for people to access NHS services, but they need to then catch up on the other side with dental services and increase the amount of dentists and access to dentistry, and especially NHS dentistry, obviously.
What's the cut-off age for free dentistry on the NHS?
So it is 18 years old, but there are exemptions around maternity, pregnancy. There's some free care around pregnancy.
We saw some data a few weeks back about the number one cause for child admission into A&E is tooth decay. I mean, that was shocking when I read it.
It's really bad, and what happens is people, kids with multiple decayed teeth, they basically have to be put under general anaesthetic, and then all those rotted teeth have to be extracted under general anaesthetic. Like, if those baby teeth start going crooked, then the adult teeth start going crooked as well. Right. So it is important to look after the baby teeth. It's really important. I think they should make it more central to their policies, definitely.
The People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Breakfast. We're still joined by Emma Burnell and Charlie Rowley. We're going through the papers. Emma, this one caught our eye this morning. Apparently, Britons have ditched the quest for perfection in their partners. We just want bang average now.
I'm finally in with a chance.
Oh, stop. Stop.
Yeah, apparently there's been a sort of, I guess, a backlash against the previous kind of dating app search for, like, literally the perfect 10 in looks, perfect 10 in personality. And now we're just looking for someone nice and average that we feel like we can settle down with. And I finally feel like my time has arrived.
But beauty is skin deep. It's about who you can find someone the most attractive person in the world. Doesn't mean anybody else has to.
No, absolutely. And I think, for me, it's always been... I mean, I've gone out with some very nice-looking fellas, don't get me wrong, but... it's the ability to make me laugh and make me think and challenge me. Like, I need someone who I can spar with rather than someone...
Oh, it'd be hard work with you, that.
This is why I live alone.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think this idea that everyone has to be picture perfect and all the rest of it doesn't mean... You can see these really gorgeous people online, but they're dull as ditch.
Well, this is it. And I think there's also, like... I think we're so used to the Instagram, like, everyone knows that an Instagram life is not a real life. And, we all put, what I put on is what I cook. I'm endlessly Instagramming my amazing food creations that my Slimming World creations that I've come up with. But I think for most people now, we've kind of got inured to that sense of perfection and that airbrushing of our lives. And actually, I think this may be a move back to a bit more realistic.
What do you make of it, Charlie?
Well, you see, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? And most of my partners have probably been blind.
Charlie!
You're right. I've had no partners. I've never been kissed, Ellie.
Well, not today.
Not
not
today.
Gonna
not yet. It's not even 9 o'clock. There's still time. But I think, but Emma's right. I mean, because it is the social media thing that I think really does. We've gone through TikTok and Instagram where there is this ideal perfection. Everything is filtered. The life is through a filtered prism of pictures, and it's actually a starking. Really, when you meet someone, actually, if you've met someone,
how ugly they are in life.
They are not as all what they appear to be, Stephen, I can assure you. And it's sad, really, because if you have to sort of go to such lengths to have this projection of yourself or feel as though the only way to be accepted is by having the most perfect picture, the most perfect body, the most perfect lifestyle, the most perfect diet, and all the rest of it. And then, of course, that is not the reality. And we all know it's not the reality. Nobody is perfect. So I think we should all probably be a little less hard on ourselves when it comes to relationships and seeking perfection and just enjoy the ride. We're here for a good time, not a long time. So enjoy the ride.
And I think also, like, just be yourself. Yourself is good enough. Like, I mean, I've never used an Instagram filter, I have to admit. Like, not on myself or not on my beef massaman curry, which is my most recent Instagram photograph. just live real.
No, I find them very odd. I know some people who use a lot of filters, and you see them they have no nose.
Yeah.
You get rid of... Like the women just seem to completely blur out their noses entirely. It's like, what's that all about?
Look, I hate my nose. My nose is my least favourite feature.
There's nothing wrong with your nose.
It looks like someone half made a nose out of plasticine and forgot to finish it.
Can you two stop being so nasty?
There's nothing wrong with your nose.
But, it is my nose. I've lived with it for 49 years. I'll live with it for another 49, hopefully.
Yeah, it'll only get bigger.
Things can only get bigger.
Noses just keep growing, don't they? I mean, I just think of the problem I'm going to have.
Oh, stop.
Now you're depressing me.
It is interesting. I was quite surprised by this because I think we're living in such an image-obsessed world, aren't we? And this leads us on nicely, Emma, to the story that you've got for us. But you'd think that people would be, especially with dating apps, where it's literally based on those few photos, isn't it, that person decides to share, whether you swipe left or swipe right, that people would be image-focused, that they would be looking for perfection. They're 10 out of 10.
As I say, I think we've gone through that phase and we're coming out the other side. Yeah.
We're looking for realness. Should we go to a break or should we touch on that story on the Times? What do we have time for?
Well, can I just...
We'll go on this story very quickly and you'll have a view on it.
Well, no, just very quick, because I remember just on Instagram, not that I've met that many people in my life. I mean, your viewers can come in. I'm single, I'm available for dates and all kinds of things. Coffee.
And kissing, apparently.
Take me to lunch first. But I think there's a time where if you would meet someone, they would say, oh, what's your Instagram? Now, that would really irritate me, because all that meant is that they're going to go and look at your pictures and think that that is not the... But you've met the person in real life.
Yeah.
But now it's gone full circle. Luckily, people, I think, can appreciate the person in front of them, rather than having to go and triple-check that they've actually met someone who they think they have through Instagram, or what they appear to be on Instagram. It's a bit bizarre.
Yeah.
I never quite got it. But that wasn't the story you wanted to talk about, was it?
No,
We've got time.
We've got time, have we?
Yep.
Dear me, so many voices in my head, and that's not even the producers. Because it ties in with this, doesn't it? Apparently, this Wegovy or Ozempic, these weight loss drugs, are being sold without proper checks.
Yeah, no,
allegedly.
This is a much, much more worrying story. Apparently, you can order these through some of our major sort of pharmacies online, and people are putting in false weights. People who are perfectly thin are trying to get hold of these weight loss drugs, and you're putting false weights in. They're now apparently going to be asked to send photographs with tight clothing on to prove that they are actually overweight. But, you know, if people are not overweight and they're taking appetite suppressant drugs, they are going to get ill. And that we are seeing lots of people presenting at A&E for exactly these reasons.
It's crazy. It's crazy. There's no magic cures to this. I mean, and you've lost a lot of weight. And you've done it the slow way and the hard way.
Well, mostly. I mean, I did have an operation to help me get there, but, yeah, mostly it was done, as I was talking earlier, through a lot of walking, through eating less, through sorting my mental health out.
Yeah.
These are the things that make it last. So there are lots of things that can help you get weight off very quickly. Keeping it off, that's the real thing.
Yeah. All right. Look, really good to see you both. Thank you very much indeed. Your time has come, Charlie, because we do get to speak to your former boss now.
Yes.
So, but you don't get to talk to him.
Oh, what bad luck.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Well, he might not want to talk to me.
I'm sure he doesn't. Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove joins us now. Good morning to you. And I'm quite sure you don't want to speak to Charlie Rowley, because, frankly, who would, Michael? We've had enough of him on the show already this morning. Look, these polls...
You can never have enough Charlie Rowley. Charlie is one of the best-informed commentators in British politics. He's also, I've been told, though I haven't done it myself, great fun on a date.
Well, there you go. Well, I think that could be breaking news this morning. Look, what do you make of these polls this morning? Because, I mean, it's not just bad news for the Conservatives. It's consistent in all the polls now that you're looking at electoral wipeout.
Yes, it's not easy reading. Just a couple of things. I mean, the first thing is that, of course, politicians look at polls and we all draw conclusions from polls, but there's still 2 weeks left. And in that 2 weeks, we are still fighting for every vote, still making arguments about the issues that really matter, such as tax, which we might go on to in a moment. But the other thing also is, if these polls, which are just snapshots at the moment, if they do turn out to be accurate, it does raise a big worry for GB News viewers, which is what happens if Labour have a supermajority? What would an unchecked Labour government without a strong opposition do? What, in their arrogance, might they do in order to either rig the electoral system, stack public bodies, or shift this country in a way which was actually a sort of over-interpretation of their mandate?
But to talk about a super-majority like that and to warn people against a super-majority, it does sound as though you're conceding defeat, which then is completely at odds with what you just said, is that there's time to turn this around. So which is it?
Well, I'm keen to have a sort of a balanced conversation with people at this stage and to say, look, I very much hope that people will vote Conservative, and there are sound policy reasons for doing so, whether that's our record on education or the prospect of future tax cuts, whether that's the investment that we've made in defence or the economic growth that will come as a result of the business policies that we're putting forward. I want to make, and am making whenever I can, that strong case And certainly, when I am with Conservative candidates out in the field, people are responding to the case that they are making. So I feel a sense of optimism about that. But at the same time, there are these opinion polls, and you entirely understandably ask me about them. And so my point is, well, I'm not convinced they're right. I really think it is possible that we can do significantly better than these polls indicate. But in fairness, if you ask me a fair question about them, I've got to say, well, if they are accurate...
You've got to be able to give people a clear message. Well, if you look at the track record of the Conservative Party over the last couple of years, there's no guarantee, even if the Tories got back into power, that actually Rishi Sunak's going to be in number 10 by the beginning of September, because there seems to be that much unhappiness within the party.
Well, I guarantee you this. If we win the election, which I hope we do, then Rishi will definitely be in number 10 this September and for years to come. More broadly, you make a fair point about, the Conservative record and have we been consistent. And yes, there was a bit of a blip, obviously, for 40-odd days after Boris and before Rishi. But I think that Boris's record, for example, on the vaccine rollout, on Ukraine and on levelling up, were achieved in lockstep with Rishi. It was Rishi who had the furlough scheme that was the sort of analogue or the matching policy alongside the vaccine rollout. It was Rishi who was the Chancellor who ensured that we could support Ukraine. It was Rishi who was the Chancellor who funded levelling up and has extended it subsequently as Prime Minister. So I do think that there has been continuity there on issues that matter, especially to GB News viewers.
Do you feel a weight of responsibility when you look at the polls out this morning, especially when you look at the red wall? Many people who lent the Tories their vote in 2019 now, according to these polls at least, going to swing back to Labour. Does that mean that you have failed in your mission to level up the north?
I don't think so, no. I mean, obviously it's concerning. Forgive me, the polls. But if one looks at, for example, Teesside, and I know that GB News has reported from Teesside consistently since its establishment. You'll see the establishment of GB News, that is, not the establishment of Teesside. But GB News has focused on, for example, what Ben Houchen has been doing, what Simon Clarke, the MP in Middlesbrough, has been doing, what Jacob Young has done for Redcar. They have brought investment in, not just government investment, but private sector investment in. The Freeport on Teesside has been responsible for the generation of thousands of jobs and hundreds of thousands, millions of investment. That is a big success as a result of Conservative leadership at every level. I could run through other areas that we've invested in, from Blackpool to Blythe, from Grimsby to Barry. But in all of these cases, it will be the voters, of course, who will reflect on whether or not we've done enough. I believe that we've made a difference for good. But again, the verdict of the voters is one which is the most important. And in the next 2 weeks, I'll be doing everything I can, whether it's in Teesside in the northeast or whether it's in the southwest, to reinforce that message of progress made and more to come.
Yeah, but you see, I'm fascinated by the fact, you mentioned investment in Blackpool. I mean, that Blackpool's an area I know really well, and it is struggling beyond belief. I don't know when you were last there, but it needs urgent help.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's what we've been doing. So Blackpool has some of the worst housing stock, or had some of the worst housing stock in the country. Blackpool is a community that suffered because the principal, job creator in Blackpool for generations has been tourism. And again, the tourism economy has shifted. But we've spent tens of millions of pounds transforming the heart of Blackpool, bringing in new investment, regenerating the town centre, and we've also provided investment for the further education college there in order to make sure that people have skills for the industries of the future. So it's not just about tourism, it's also about energy and renewables. And of course, there's a long way to go, but this is just proof of our determination to help a community that's been, as you quite rightly point out, overlooked in the past.
Mr Gove, why are you stepping down from politics when it's clear that your party needs you now more than ever?
Well, I'm not. It's very kind of you, but in a way, I think what our party needs is, like all parties, it needs renewal, and that's why I think that the next generation of Conservative leaders, people like Claire Coutinho, Laura Trott, Kemi Badenoch, they are the people who will carry the torch forward, and I will do everything I can to support them. But it's time for that generation, alongside Rishi Sunak, to revive, renew and re-energise the Conservative Party for its next phase in government.
OK. Michael Gove, really good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Do you want to say goodbye, Charlie?
Goodbye, Mike. Always great. He's a fantastic. He's a pro. Yeah. I miss him. He'll be missed in politics. He really will.
Yeah,
he's a heavyweight Conservative. He's done a lot for this country.
Right. Thank you all, and thank you as well to Emma Burnell for taking us through the papers. This is Breakfast. It is 3 minutes past 9 on Thursday, the 20th of June. Today, as you've just heard, Michael Gove says the Tories still have time to defy the polls after they suggest the party will suffer its worst defeat in 100 years.
Still 2 weeks left. And in that 2 weeks, we are still fighting for every vote, still making arguments about the issues that really matter, such as tax, which we might go on to in a moment. But the other thing also is, if these polls, which are just snapshots at the moment, if they do turn out to be accurate, it does raise a big worry for GB News viewers, which is what happens if Labour have a supermajority.
Well, the Tories are up against more than politicians in Labour now, though. Sir Keir Starmer recruits the help of former England footballer Gary Neville as he sells his vision for the country.
The search intensifies for a missing teen in Tenerife as his mum reveals a horrifying message she received when he disappeared.
Just Stop Oil have been at it again this morning. 2 activists have broken into a private airfield at Stansted Airport to vandalise a private jet. That comes as the group faced widespread criticism for defacing Stonehenge yesterday with orange powder.
Racing's glitziest festival continues. Royal Ascot and our royal correspondent Cameron Walker is there for Ladies' Day.
Good morning. It'll be a fine and dry day for many of us with temperatures approaching the mid-20s. Find out all the details with me a little later on.
Morning to you, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
So those polls out today, there's 3 of them, 3 big polls out today, all slightly different, but all painting a very grim picture for the Conservative Party. One, though, which Michael Gove has just told us, they could turn round, he claims.
Let's get the thoughts of our political editor, Christopher Hope. Very good to see you this morning, Christopher. I mean, the front page of the Daily Telegraph says it all, doesn't it? A Tory wipeout. But we've just been speaking to Michael Gove, who thinks there is still time to turn it around.
Yeah, morning, Ellie. Morning, TV. I brought the Telegraph with me on the Tory battle bus today because it really is extraordinary when you have a newspaper that supports the Tory party with a headline 2 weeks out from polling day saying Tory wipeout. But frankly, that's all you can say about the polling they've got there from Savanta. 18,000 people surveyed between the 7th and the 18th of June. It is a complete disaster for the Tory party, down to 53 MPs, just 3 more than normally the third party in politics, Liberal Democrats, Labour on 516. I was struck by the interview there with Michael Gove. He says he fears the consequences of that scale of defeat. Of course, the Tory party is saying that the only poll that matters is July the 4th, and so it goes on. But we are just 2 weeks out from the election, and this party is going backwards, not forwards, not least for the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who, according to this MRP polling, this seat-by-seat analysis, will lose his seat in Richmond for the first time ever for a sitting Prime Minister. Normally, in the past, we had Arthur Balfour, 1906. He lost his seat as a leader of the opposition, having just quit as Prime Minister. But this is extraordinary times, and there's a lot to do for this party in the next 2 weeks to stop, frankly, the annihilation of the Conservative Party at the polls.
Why is it, Christopher, that the polls aren't narrowing at this point? Because that would be the normal thing, that when people actually have to really think about where they're going to vote, they sort of stick with what they know.
That's a really good question. I sense, having been out and about with all the battle buses, and with this week mainly with the Tory party, is that people are just turning off to their messaging. On average, the Rishi Sunak's been going to seats with maybe 15,000 majorities. That's not a normal figure you go to. If you're trying to fight to win back the seats you won in 2019 in the Red Wall, you go to much more marginal seats. He's not doing that. He's just trying to preserve the party's future for the next election. That is a testament to maybe the wrong decision to call this early election, possibly. I think maybe people have turned off to the Tory message after 14 years. And also, there's the one hope I would say for the Tory party is there are lots of undecideds. Many people are just sick of politics, don't want to be made to make this choice, but they have to. And it may be that the don't knows can be converted to Tory voters. In that Savanta poll, for example, there's 100 seats which are up for grabs, apparently. So if they were to go back towards the Tory party, it would mitigate this disaster. But we are barely a third of the number of seats won by the party in 1997, which is seen as a high watermark in a very bad Tory performance. So there's a huge amount of work to do. How do they get people to listen? I think they are playing quite a safety-first campaign. Yesterday we were in a nuclear power station. The day before we were with Rishi Sunak in a barn with farmers, amongst workers or supporters. I just wonder why he's not going out in the street and stopping the bus I'm on and just meeting random people, having a debate, debating the government's record with the GB News camera behind him watching it happen. That would be great, I think, for morale, showing he's taking the fight to Labour. Instead, he's been like a Prime Minister, visiting people, employees in workplaces, not fighting to win this election. I don't know why.
Maybe that's something you can put to Rishi Sunak, because you're on the Tory battle bus right now, aren't you, Christopher Hope? Can you describe the mood for us in that bus? Do they still feel as though there's something to play for here? They've got 2 weeks. You mentioned those undecided voters. Perhaps they could convert them, or do they feel as though it could be a Tory wipeout?
Yeah, well, currently, I'm afraid the bus is full of journalists waiting to go off on a trip today with Michael Gove, who's been on your programme, because Rishi Sunak is heading north to a leaders' debate up in Yorkshire tonight. He'll be answering questions on another channel from members of the public, so he's focusing on that. But yeah, I think they think they can do it, but the problem is the weight of these numbers, of these three big MRP polls in 1 hour yesterday, forecasting a Labour landslide. It goes back to even the first poll we had on GB News, the first MRP poll, back in the day, back in, God goodness, 3 weeks ago, I think it was. We gave the Tories 72 seats then, and that was widely seen as, wow, that's an amazing outlier. But look at the numbers yesterday. I mean, this may well not happen. There's a long way to go. 14 days, a lot can change because of the don't knows, but this is a really, really uphill struggle now for the Prime Minister.
I'll tell you what I think is quite interesting, Christopher, because there is a lot of talk, and understandably, about the undecideds, because they say it's often the undecideds who say, I'm just going to stick with the Conservatives in this case, which would boost those numbers a little bit. The problem is there seems to be a lot of people now, if you anecdotally at least, who say, well, I'm undecided, and do you know what? I'm just not going to bother.
Yeah, and that's a problem, and that's where maybe these polls might help, because people say that a supermajority is an elective dictatorship, to use that quote from Lord Hailsham back in 1960s about a party winning far too many seats, and there's no proper opposition to them. So that may force them out, and that's why I think we've heard in recent days, in the past week or so, senior cabinet ministers talking about the risks of a Labour supermajority and the lack of a decent opposition. But I think people are just tired of the Tory party not delivering on their promises. They say they're going to cut taxes. That's the big thing. We'll cut taxes, Labour won't. But the truth is the party hasn't cut taxes for the past 5 years. Yes, Ukraine happened. Yes, there was an energy shock. Yes, COVID happened. But taxes are still at a post-war high, and that's the worry. Why is that the case? And is it? And how can this party believe when it says it will cut taxes? That's a problem. And so people are thinking, well, let's take a chance on Keir Starmer.
One of the key points, which we didn't actually talk to Michael Gove about, but he wanted to talk about, was first-time buyers, permanently getting rid of stamp duty for first-time buyers. What I would have said to him, I guess what a lot of people will be thinking is, well, that all sounds well and good, except it's been in place for 4 years already. Just talking about making it permanent. So it's not actually bringing anything new to the table.
He has said that the Conservatives
No, it's not, Stephen, but of course the problem is there's not a lot of money to go around. The finances are really tight, and the Labour Party's plans are built heavily on growth. There's a big punt on growth. I mean, normally if the Tory Party would say that, they'd be taken apart, but I think people want to give Labour a chance to see if they can grow the economy with their plans for the greening of the economy on energy, the great British energy company and the like. So money is so tight, so really they can only just shuffle about what they've got already. And of course, as we know, we keep telling our viewers on GB News that those thresholds are frozen until 2028, which means that more and more of us are paying those higher rates of tax as inflation goes up and as people get pay rises and their income increases. So that's the problem. There's not a lot of money to be ambitious about how to spend money.
OK, Christopher Hope, our political editor there on the Tory battle bus. Thank you very much indeed. And we've just got a message in from Michael Meakin on gbnews.com/you'll saying, get the Rwanda flight started. That will get the Tories voting.
Well, it will, but it's not going to happen until after the election.
24th of July is the date that Rishi Sunak has earmarked, and that is after the general election.
Which is a very odd decision in and of itself, some would argue. Anyway, you'll keep having your thoughts through this morning, I guess. Right. How you go from the Conservative battle bus to racing's glitziest event, Ladies' Day at Royal Ascot, I do not know, but we'll try, won't we?
But it is Ladies' Day, of course, and our royal correspondent Cameron Walker is there to tell us all about it. Morning to you, Cameron, and what do we have to look forward to today?
Good morning, Ellie. Well, the sun is shining here on Ladies' Day at Royal Ascot, or Gold Cup Day as well. If we just look to my left here, this is the parade ring, and this is where this afternoon members of the royal family will process in carriages in front of thousands of spectators before they enter the royal box for the start of the races. It's also where the horses who are running today will be paraded around the ring, so people know or can decide who to place bets on if they so wish. And we've had many members of the royal family here this week already. The Queen has been here every day so far. The Prince of Wales was here yesterday, but he is not going to be here today because he's flying to Germany to watch England play in the Euros. The King was here on day one, but yesterday he had some official duties at Buckingham Palace to take care of, and we don't have confirmation yet as to which members of the royal family will be here later. But from when I was here on Tuesday, I just got this amazing sense of the intimacy between different family relationships when it comes to the royal family, and they all kind of mingle around on this green here when the procession is over, and it's really lovely to see. So, for example, Zara Tindall, the King's niece, gave him a big hug in front of all of the spectators, and it was really lovely to see. The winners' podium here is where members of the royal family also give out trophies to the winners of the races. So Prince William and Princess Eugenie gave out trophies yesterday. We also had Princess Anne on Tuesday give out trophies as well. But the King and Queen are going to be hoping for a few winners themselves, at least one. They've got 5 horses racing throughout this week of Royal Ascot. If you remember those amazing pictures of Desert Hero last year winning the King George V Stakes, the royal box pictures of the King and Queen just beside themselves with excitement that their horse was winning, also particularly poignant because it was the late Queen who bred that horse. So good luck to all the runners here today, but I think the King and Queen particularly will have their eyes on a few horses.
Oh, Cameron, I wish I was there. Sounds amazing, and you look so smart as well. Have a lovely day. Really good to see you.
Thank you.
So jealous.
He's loving it, isn't he?
I know he is.
He looks the part. God bless him. God bless him.
He was telling me about his suit and his top hat last week.
Why did he just pull it out the back of the wardrobe?
Doesn't he look dapper? I don't know where he got it from, but he looks wonderful, doesn't he? He suits it very much.
He does suit it. Right. If you did have 15 grand in cash, I wouldn't say go and gamble it at the races.
Oh, would you not?
No, lots more sensible things you could do with it. But it is your chance to get your hands on 15 grand's worth of cash and a whole host of summer treats in our giveaway.
Yes, it could all be yours, but of course you've got to be in it to win it. So here are all the details that you need.
Don't miss out on your chance to win our Summer Spectacular. And have we got a prize for you? First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
And just a lovely view. Good luck with that. But also a lovely view from Ian Cognito, who says Cameron always looks impeccable. He's a credit to his family.
I don't think Ian.
That's lovely.
I don't think Ian Cognito is his real name.
Is his real name? No, very good.
Anyway.
But I'll send that to Cameron. I'll make sure he sees that.
Right, coming up for you, we're going to be meeting one of you. Find out how you sort of feel like voting in the next election. We're going to talk to a landlord in Manchester. That's next.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel. Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Helen Worth, who of course plays Gail Platt in Coronation Street, is going to leave the soap after an epic 50 years. I'm joined now by another Corrie legend, Charlie Lawson, whose character, of course, Jim McDonald, lived across the cobbles from Gail Platt for many years. Welcome to the show, Charlie. I can see you looking at those images there, and has to be said, fantastic acting. In 50 years, many of us just grew up with these characters and basically think they're part of our family. Can you shed light on some of your happy memories of the talent of Helen Worth?
We saw each other every day. She was a consummate professional and still is. This initially surprised me, but then I thought about it, and I'm frankly not surprised. Having spoken to certain senior members of the cast over the last period of time, you know, when Helen joined, or even when I joined, there was a cast of 25. I would put another 75 on that now, perhaps. It's a different animal now, totally, you know, 4, 5, 6 episodes a week. When Helen started, it would have been 2. She lives in London. She's not getting any younger. And she's done 50 years, for God's sake. Nobody can ask any more of that. And listen, Helen, look at that wee smile. God bless you, darling. I hope you have a great retirement. The trouble with actors is that we very, very rarely hang our boots up unless the bank balance is full, which it very seldom is. But also, we live for attention. And when you're in the most famous program on the planet, that attention 9 times out of 10 is an extremely good experience.
The People's Channel.
All right, well, there's everything. Look at the polls. Just everything to play for the Conservatives, or nothing to lose, I guess, is one way of looking at it. But what about those people who are Labour supporters? Are they being enthused by what they're seeing from Keir Starmer?
Well, it's a good question. Let's go to Manchester, shall we, and speak to a landlord who has always voted Labour. She's with Sophie Reaper. Morning, you two.
Good morning to you both. Well, we heard yesterday, didn't we, that inflation is now down to 2%. So on that thread, joining me now is one of our GB News election voices, Cyan Astley. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Rishi Sunak yesterday was quoted saying, "We've got there" about inflation. Do you think we've got there? And if so, is that going to make you more likely to vote Conservative this time?
Well, I don't think we've got there, really, have we? Inflation at 2%. It's not really 2%, is it? Everything is still hugely expensive, but service inflation is still between 5 and 6%. I don't think people really feel that, oh, inflation's way down now. Well done, Rishi. All marvellous, because that's just not how people feel. And he's kidding himself, really, with this kind of happy act that that's how people really feel about it, because it's too little too late.
To be fair to the Prime Minister, obviously when he took over, it was at that record high in the October of 2022, and he did promise that he was going to halve that. Do you think he's fulfilled that promise?
I think separating out Rishi Sunak from the party, for me, is a mistake. And for most voters, it's the party, it's the Conservatives. They've been in power for a long, long time, and interest rates have been too low for too long. People have made life decisions based on the fact they've been, you've been able to get borrowing at 1% and 2%. And then for it to suddenly have gone up ridiculously quickly to over 5%, it's really, really damaged people's lives. People can't afford to pay their mortgages, let alone the price of gas and electric, the price of going out for your weekly shop. So I can't separate Rishi from the party, and the Conservatives have been in power all this time. They've made a mess of it.
You mentioned interest rates. We're expecting that announcement at midday today, where we're expecting that the Bank of England will announce that interest rates will remain the same at 5.25%. Experts are predicting that that won't change now until August. Do you think that that's perhaps too slow for families and businesses who are already struggling?
I can understand why they're keeping it at 5.25%. They're being cautious because inflation still isn't down to where they need it to be, even though they're saying it is. I think they've got to bring the interest rates down because families are really, really struggling. But are they going to do it just before an election, or does it look too political? For me, I don't think they were ever going to reduce it. When he announced his snap election, I think he would have been more sensible as a party to have the election a little bit later in the year when they brought the interest rates down. That might have boded a little bit better for them. I mean, going forward, I've got rental property, and we've got one of our properties. The 2-year mortgage deal has just elapsed, and it's doubled. It's gone from 3.4%. They now want 7.9% for the mortgage. It's not sustainable for business owners, whether they're landlords like me or regular business owners. When you take out a mortgage, when you take out a loan and it suddenly doubles, how are you supposed to deal with that? And there's not enough of a conversation for me about how that's affected people, whether you're a homeowner or a landlord or a business owner.
Obviously, it's 2 weeks now until the general election, and people will be heading to the polls. As a landlord and property owner, has there been anything you've seen in the manifestos from the various parties that's convinced you to vote for them come the 4th of July?
I think that, Labour always make landlords nervous, but historically, actually, under the Blair government was fantastic for landlords. The explosion of buy-to-let. The Conservatives have been disastrous for landlords. Section 24s, not allowing you to discount mortgage interest from your top-line figure. All the attacks on landlords. So the traditional party that a landlord would support has kind of been flipped on its head. I'd be really interested to see what Labour come out with. I know they're very pro-tenants, and there's nothing wrong with that. Tenants should be protected, but not at the expense of good landlords. And if you lose landlords, if landlords flood out of the private rented sector, that's going to be disastrous for tenants and housing. So they have to balance that. Are Labour going to come in? Everybody's saying that's highly likely. So I think they have to take quite a sensible approach and not just attack.
Cyan, thank you so much for your time this morning. There we are. That's one of our GB News election voices, and over the next 2 weeks, I'm sure we'll be hearing from many more of them about what matters to them as we approach that general election.
OK, Sophie, thanks very much indeed.
We are back from 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
But up next, it's Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Another